An entitled customer steals my food that I was gonna take home from my restaurant job, as he literally takes it off the rack that was not meant for him and walks right out the door. And I'm honestly so pissed off because I seriously cannot stand dealing with people like this. Here's what happened. Okay, so I just finished my shift and ordered boneless wings to go, and I wanted them extra wet so that they wouldn't be dry by the time I got home. I went up front to the host stand to get my stuff together and leave, just like I always do, and I set my to-go bag down on the bottom shelf of the tall rack next to the host stand. And mind you, this bag has a bright yellow ticket on it that has my name all over it, and it's on the order taped on the bag. And also, this rack is used for to-go orders, but only the top shelf. The other 3 shelves are regularly used for storage. We also have a sign on top of the rack that says to not take the to-go orders off the rack and to let the host do it. I stepped away for maybe a minute to call somebody, and I was gone for less than 5 minutes. And when I came back, my food was gone. Now, the host just came up front, so she had gone to the kitchen after I stepped away, and I asked her if she had seen my food, and she was really confused. Then she said it was possible that a customer could have taken it. She said that she had checked a guy out while I was away and told him that it would still be a few minutes for his order, and she went to the kitchen to check on the order. Well, he was gone now, so we called him. I listened to the whole call, and she told him that he had the wrong order and he needed to come back because his order was still being made. Well, this genius said to me, I'm gonna go home first and then we'll make sure that it's the wrong order. And it's like, no, we're telling you that it's the wrong order. You just left. All you have to do is turn around. Well, 10 minutes later, he calls us back, and then he says to us, after taking a look at the order and the ticket on the bag, it's clear that it's the wrong order. And it's like, yeah, that is what we told you. He came back and didn't even apologize for taking someone else's order. He just barely stuck his head inside. He handed it over, grabbed his, and made sure he got his ranch before leaving without another word. And I was so upset about it. By the time I got home, the wings were dry. This guy is a regular to-go order customer who took the bag that was at the bottom of the shelf at the floor and assumed it was his after being told his wasn't ready. Then he just left without telling anybody. I mean, seriously, what goes through people's heads when they do things like this? He looked and talked to us like he was the one being inconvenienced. I told another host about this, and they said it was perfectly fine and nothing wrong about it, but that they're only saying that because they like him. So seriously, I'm still so annoyed by this, and I really just cannot get over it. Oh yeah, this really pisses me off. I would be so upset if someone stole my food after a long day of working. Like, you even specially ordered that exactly the way you like them so that you could actually enjoy them when you got home. And the fact that your friend is trying to be like, oh, it's totally fine, you're just being weird. Like, no dude, you're being weird. This level of entitlement is so annoying. The customer literally just heard, hey, your stuff is still being made, let me check on it. And instead of waiting, they're like, oh look, a free bag, I'm gonna take that. It's like, dude, what are you doing? Did we not just have a conversation literally 10 seconds ago that said, hey, I'll be right back, I'm gonna check on your order and see where it's at? Like, seriously, what's happening right now? Did this guy suddenly have like convenient amnesia where he's like, oh look, a bag, let me get it and go home? So no, you're not overreacting or anything like that, and I think your friend's an idiot for trying to be like, oh, it's okay, it's fine, there's nothing wrong with it. Because yes, everything is wrong with this situation. And the fact that he didn't even have the decency to try and be like, oh, I'm so sorry for taking that bag, or apologize at all, says absolutely everything you would ever need to know about that guy. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. The person I was seeing got married right behind my back, and after 5 months of dating them, I'm honestly not sure what to do. Here's what happened. Okay, so I've been seeing someone for around 5 months now. We started out casual, but it was starting to feel like it was getting more serious. I thought we clicked well, we had fun, and we enjoyed spending time together. He made plans with me and was starting to share more intimate things with me. He seemed very sweet, level-headed, smart, I mean, you name it, and he had it. I thought he was a catch, but about a month ago, he seemed off and said he was going through a hard time with work and was just stressed out. He was not really answering calls or text messages like he normally would, and he went totally dark for a few days. But then eventually it all went back to normal. But unfortunately, that was a lie. It turns out about a month ago, he got married to another woman, and I have no idea about her age or any of those details. Despite it being a short time, I'm devastated. I feel disgusted, used, and disappointed. I believe in marriage and I take it seriously. And I realize there is someone else in this situation who stands to get their heart broken. I don't know anything about this other woman, and I'm torn between walking away and saying nothing, and walking away but trying to find her details to tell her what he's been up to. If it were me, I'm not sure I would want to know this information, but then again, maybe I would. I can't tell if I'm blinded by shock and sadness right now. How would you handle this? I want to be mature about this, but I hate that people like this are out there, hurting others for what feels like no reason other than their own selfishness. What should I do? Okay, if I'm dating someone and I find out they're married all of a sudden, you better believe I'm telling that other person. person. I don't care what's going on. This is honestly so crazy to me. Because here's the thing, you're not getting married overnight. I don't care who you are. You're not all of a sudden gonna get married to someone and be like, okay, happily ever after. And yes, I know there's extenuating circumstances where people actually do that, but I'm talking like overall, general people who are like, okay, I've known this person for several years and now I'm gonna get married. Because that's clearly what's been going on behind the scenes. The original poster was just some kind of like side piece for this guy, and she had no idea that he was engaged and getting married soon. Like seriously, what a scumbag. So I know if I was in your shoes, I would absolutely tell that other lady. I would 100% tell that lady that he was cheating, because what he did is incredibly sketchy, and that is something that she has the right to know. An entitled jerk keeps stealing my footballs anytime we go to practice, so I decided to get some petty revenge by secretly deflating them behind his back. Here's what happened. Okay, to start things out, I am European, so the footballs that I'm referring to are not the same that you would find in America. I'm working as a volunteer football coach for some kids in a small club. I really enjoy being a coach, and I help them improve their football skills. I always arrive a bit early at the club to prepare drills and the materials for the training session, and there is another coach at the club who is a real jerk. He seriously thinks he's the next big thing, which in my opinion, he definitely is not. He doesn't prepare drills by drawing or writing them down. He always makes negative comments about mine or other coaches' drills. He doesn't respect pitch schedules and always leaves goals on the pitch, so we have to spend time removing them, and he also loses balls and other materials all the time. I have tried to talk with him about this, but he says he has more coaching experience and that he has been at the club longer than I have, so I just have to get used to his ways. The final straw of his behavior was when after a training session, my team couldn't find some of our footballs. We then spent up to half an hour trying to find them, and for reference, every ball is marked with team names to recognize the balls. But eventually it got late, and we had to go back down because the kids' parents were waiting for them. Now, I was frustrated because I always make sure that when a ball is kicked out of the pitch, the kids are ordered to go get the ball back immediately. Balls are expensive, and if we lose them, we have to wait some time before we are getting new ones. I got back to the ball lockers and was putting them back inside my team lockers, and right there I saw 3 of my balls in my coach colleague's ball locker, and all of my team balls had been marked over with his team name by him. Well, instead of trying to talk to him about it and get my balls back, where he definitely will deny him doing such a thing, I instead brought in a ball pressure gauge. And so for the last 2 months, I've deflated all of his balls before training session to the point where he has to inflate all of them to make them useful. And it's funny how he's started to complain about the quality of the balls and that he deserves new balls now. And honestly, this guy's a massive jerk, and this is exactly what he gets for stealing my footballs. I love the fact that you did this because that guy does sound like a jerk. He's literally trying to excuse his crappy behavior by being like, oh, I've got more experience. You're just gonna have to deal with it. And that's just super weird. Like seriously, just be reasonable. So good for you for getting back at him in the way that you did, because if he's gonna steal those footballs, then congratulations, they're always going to be deflated. The local coffee shop that I work for was incredibly toxic, as they tried to posture themselves as a fine dining experience. But after quitting and meeting some of the other coworkers that worked there, I realized that this was not an isolated incident, and I'm honestly so glad I don't deal with them any longer. Here's what happened. Okay, so this is my very first time doing something like this. I worked at White Noise Coffee, a locally owned coffee shop in New York City. When I was hired, my job description was just barista, but on the first day, training was all rushed. They expected me to learn all the point of sale and make drinks on the same day, and then on my second day, do kitchen work. And at that time, they recently opened a kitchen area and expected for all baristas to cook restaurant-style quality. They taught me once and made me do 5 orders right away on rush hour, while one of the owners, who we will call Hans, yelled by your ear and was throwing tantrums, while Hans's wife, who we will call Vanessa, and also an owner of the restaurant, just watches us get mistreated while having a smirk on her face. Now, because I was not able to cook, Hans threw all the utensils and pan to the sink and told me to wash everything before I leave for my shift, and that if I did not clean it properly, it would come out of my paycheck. Well, naturally, I quit over the phone with Vanessa, and I commented on how the workplace is very toxic, but she just decided to laugh and said, I thought you were better. Hans's attitude is like this because he was an accountant, which made no sense at all. Later on in my coffee career, I met ex-workers from White Noise who also everyone commented on how terrible that place was, which brings me to the topic of one particular worker who stayed long enough to know the owners better and then asked them why their attitudes were so awful. They said basically they want White Noise to serve like a fine dining experience, and the reason they're so tough on the employees is to filter the strong ones out from the weak ones. And funny enough, all the good baristas that were in White Noise are the people that I met. One way I would describe White Noise on how terrible it was is that basically it was the TV show The Bear, but honestly it was worse, because Hans would physically pull and push you if you made even a small mistake mistake. So yeah, I'm glad I don't work there anymore because that place sounds incredibly toxic. Okay, in my opinion, you can still have high standards for what you want served at your restaurant, but also choose not to be a complete jerk in the process. Screaming in someone's ear over food and all this other crap, like that honestly doesn't do anything except stress people out. No one should have to deal with that. I don't know about you, but if someone started doing that to me, you better believe that's not gonna go well for that person. That doesn't teach discipline or like teach them how to be a better chef or whatever. That only teaches them that, oh yeah, this person is literally the devil and I can't wait to get away from them. Oh, and by the way, it's not weak to quit a job that's being toxic towards you. You don't owe those people anything. Like, those people are losers and there's no way that anyone should ever have to deal with that. So good for you for getting out of there in the way that you did, because those people sound like absolute nightmares to work for. Am I the jerk for not wanting my boyfriend's mom to move in with us, as she is literally taking the one space that I had left that I could claim as my own in this house? Because right now I don't know what to do. Here's what happened. Okay, to start things out, I've always been close to my grandma, and when she got sick, I dropped everything at the age of 20 to take care of her on my own, hours away from any other family. We had a wonderful relationship, and unfortunately she passed away in March of 2024, and those 5 years that she was sick were very hard for me. On a separate note, in January of 2024, I began long-distance dating someone. We originally met in high school, and I was so happy to be reconnecting with him. I was head over heels, and my mom and grandma were excited for him. Before she passed away, my grandma told me to move out of state and be happy with him, because it's my time to live now. And so I did it. She died and I moved in with him in October. Now, I realize this sounds really stupid, and I really should have known better, like seriously, because life is so hard right now, and I'm adjusting to a lot at once. I have nothing and nobody here. I'm in my first serious relationship, and I share a space with him and my 5-year-old stepdaughter. Everything here is so different from home. And worst of all, I still mourn my grandma like she died yesterday. It changed me, and not in a pleasant way. I'm moody and apathetic, and while I do my very best every day, I'm still not the bright, bubbly woman I used to be. I had hoped that my boyfriend would help me through this, but I feel lonelier than ever. We never really talk much about my grief. When I freak out, I try explaining to him that I am in a world of pain, and I'm sorry because it causes me to be a big handful, but he is still always upset with me because I sometimes don't want to play with his daughter when I'm sad or tired. He's upset because I'm not optimistic about trying new things, and there's always a reason we're upset at each other. And now his mom is staying with us for personal reasons, which hadn't really been a part of the plan, but he invited her without consulting me first. I got really upset because I live here too, and this affects me as well, and quite frankly, I was raised believing couples need to live alone, definitely with no moms under the roof. But I understand her situation, so I asked him to have a conversation with her about what her plan was, how long she was planning on staying, what does staying here look like, but he still hasn't talked to her. Ultimately, I'm upset because in this house there are 4 rooms. He and I share one room, his daughter has her own, which she rarely uses by the way, as she's only here on weekends, and even then, she sleeps and hangs out with us. He has his office and the last is completely empty. Before I even moved in, I asked if I could use it because I need my personal space sometimes. He said absolutely, I definitely need my own space and that it will be good for me to have a room for myself. I planned on creating my own little safe space for when I was feeling especially sad or just having a tough time with grief or overstimulation or anything. I had been planning what bookshelves to buy, sending him photos, telling him my plans of filling it with my grandma's plants, and just creating a cozy atmosphere. But then he gave it to his mom, again without consulting me. But now he's angry because I asked if his mom can't just stay in his daughter's room, you know, since the room is unused and his daughter likes sleeping with his mom anyways. And especially because this was supposed to be temporary. How is it that everybody has their own space but me? I can't even cry in peace because I don't have anywhere to go without someone walking in. And it's killing me that he can't understand the enormous adjustments and the immense grief that I'm experiencing. I don't think I'm asking for too much, but honestly, I need to know. Am I the jerk in this situation? Because right now, I really don't know what to do. Okay, in my opinion, this just doesn't sound like this is a good fit. I know for myself, I need my own space. I can't really function without having somewhere I can go to do my own thing. And the fact that he took away that one space you had without talking to you first, and also moved his mom in without talking to you at all about it, like that is a big red flag in my opinion, and I would not put up with that for a second. So I know if I was in your shoes, I would be moving out. I would not live there. There's just no way that's gonna work. I would find an apartment and get my own space, because this clearly is not working in my opinion. And I know if I was in your shoes, I would absolutely hate having to deal with this. My entitled neighbor seems to think that just because I have a car that drives by his work, I am now somehow his personal Uber who is gonna drive him to and from work. And now I'm honestly super frustrated and I don't know what to do. Here's what happened. happened. Okay, to start things off, a few weeks ago, I finally bought a new car. It's nothing too flashy, but it is a big deal for me because I've been saving up for a while and I also got really lucky. So needless to say, I was feeling very good about it. One morning, I was driving to work and I saw my neighbor walking down the street. We are friendly, but not super close, and I figured I would be nice, so I pulled over and I asked if he needed a lift. He happily accepted, and during the ride, we realized that we work fairly close to each other. Now, no big deal, right? Well, apparently that one ride turned into an unspoken agreement. The next day, I saw him standing there at the same spot, clearly waiting for me. I thought to myself, all right, whatever, I'll give him another ride. But now it's been every single day ever since then. Rain or shine, he is there. No text message, no asking. He's just standing there waiting. At first, I didn't mind too much, but now it's getting on my nerves. Some mornings I just want to listen to music, zone out, or even just stop for coffee without worrying about someone else's schedule. I even tried leaving earlier once, thinking that he'd get the hint, but no. The next day he mentioned how he must have missed me. Now, I don't want to be a jerk, but I never agreed to be his personal chauffeur. I was just trying to be nice one time, and now I feel awkward bringing it up because I don't want to cause any weird tension with a neighbor. So seriously, would I be the bad guy if I just started running late or having meetings in the morning? Or should I just straight up tell him that I don't want to give him rides every day? What should I do? Okay, in my opinion, there's no reason you should ever have to give this guy a ride. There's nothing wrong with being direct and saying, listen, I can't give you a ride. This isn't working for me. You need to find your own way to work moving forward. And it doesn't matter if his work is like on the way to your work. That is still an unnecessary stop that you did not sign up for. I mean, if he really wants to get to work, then guess what? He can take the bus. Like, that's what public transportation is for. You're not this guy's personal driver and you have no obligation to him. And it doesn't matter that he's your neighbor. This is so weirdly entitled, it honestly is like super annoying. So no, you would not be the jerk for using your words and saying, no, I can't give you a ride anymore. Because the very fact that this guy's expecting it without setting up some kind of arrangement, like him paying you for gas or something like that, in my opinion, is incredibly toxic. My wife cheated on me the night before, but confessed to me immediately the next day. And now I'm left feeling so heartbroken that I honestly don't know what to do. Here's what happened. Okay, as the title states, my wife cheated on me and it happened 10 days ago. She went out with her friends, met a guy, drank more than usual, started flirting, got tempted, resisted for some time, and then he seduced her. And they then had some unprotected quality time, if you know what I mean. I went to bed early because I had work the next day, so I didn't see her until the next morning. Now, she was home but didn't sleep in our bed and slept in the living room, and I guess she just didn't want to wake me up. Anyways, I took my stuff and I went to work. When I came back home from work, we had lunch, but I could tell something wasn't right. Long story short, she told me that she had something to say to me and that it was heavy and difficult. She then informed me that she slept with a guy the night before. She told me all the details. There were no tears, no begging, no nothing. She had probably cried the entire day while I was at work, but while she was telling me what she did, there wasn't any crying. Now, of course, I was shocked. My sweetheart, my friend, my other half had betrayed me and stabbed me in the back. I had no words, absolutely nothing I could say. I just looked at her and she looked at me, and there was nothing, only silence. We didn't speak that day and we just did the chores like robots. And over the next few days, we had a few conversations. I asked her if that was all and she said yes. I asked her how I could believe anything she said and she replied that I couldn't. I asked her how I could trust her with anything and she said that I could not. She said that there was no going back, that there was nothing we could do to go back, and she just asked me if there was anything I would like to try at all. I then asked her if she realized that the path of us reconciling might never work, that it could be a waste of time, money, and emotions, and only prolong the inevitable. She said yes, and then I asked her if she understood that I might never forgive her, that forgiveness and grace are gifts given freely and not something you deserve or get for being a good person, and to that she also said yes. I asked her why it happened, and she told me it was thrilling, exciting, and something new, even though she was drunk and she made her decision. I told her that now I know she's capable of such a thing. What is stopping her from doing it again? She said that she didn't think she was capable of doing something so horrible and that she would do everything to ensure it doesn't happen again. But I told her I can't trust her ever again. I love her, but I don't respect her anymore, and I told her so. She then apologized, but I told her that apologies and words are meaningless and worthless. She said she would accept whatever decision I make, but she promised on everything that she has that she would atone for her mistake, that she would never do anything like that again, and that she would be grateful to me for the rest of her life. She also said that if I chose to divorce her, she wouldn't make it difficult and that she would carry that burden forever. I then took a few days off and I left for my grandparents' house on the farm just to think things over, and at this point I'm unsure. I love her, she is the only woman that exists for me, but at the same time, I understand that I would lose my pride and self-respect if I take her back. She was honest and took responsibility, made no excuses, and is ready to accept whatever decision I make. She is a cheater, but at least she has some kind of decency. But at this point, I'm honestly so hurt and I seriously don't know what to do. Okay, first of all, I want to say I'm so sorry this happened because from the sounds of it, you do not deserve this. Your wife cheated in a way that you clearly did not expect was ever going to happen. And that seriously sucks. I'm so sorry that happened because you just don't deserve this kind of treatment. And sure, she apologized and said, I'm so sorry this happened, and she admitted to it right away, but that doesn't excuse the fact that she's married and she still chose to do that. And just like the original poster, I would be devastated if I found that out. It would be very hard for me to come back and be like, oh, it's fine, don't worry about it. Let's go to therapy and figure this out. It's like, no, dude, this is crazy to me. You literally betrayed me on something I thought you would be perfect at. I thought you would be perfect at not cheating on me, but clearly you can't, and now here we are. So I can't really say on whether or not you should stay with her because that's obviously your decision, but I know if I was in your shoes, I would really be thinking this over because what she did to you is absolutely unexcusable, and this is something that you did not deserve in the slightest. My entitled coworker gets arrested right in front of me at work after he tries to one-up a cop in a stupid argument, resulting in the cop finding out about my coworker's warrant for their arrest. And I've never been more satisfied to watch someone's downfall. Here's what happened. So first and foremost, the names have been changed to protect the innocent and the very, very stupid. So many moons ago, I worked at a now defunct convenience store as well as a gas station in the Midwest. I was initially a bit hesitant to take the job at the convenience store because it was just the sort of place that you always hear about getting robbed in some way, shape, or form. However, it was new, brightly lit, and clean, and it was on a very busy road. Also, I needed a second job pronto because going to university is expensive and a girl's gotta eat. Ramen and peanut butter only go so far. After I started working there, I quickly realized that my worries about being robbed were probably unfounded, as my store was somehow the meeting point for all the police. The local city cops, the county sheriff, and even detectives all wandered into my store multiple times a day. They would stand around and chat with the staff, or just stop in for a snack or drink on the way to work, and this will be important later. So while I didn't have to worry about robbers, I actually kind of enjoyed my job. But with all things considered, there was one major annoyance. I got along well with all of the employees but one, and his name is Branson. Branson was in his early 20s, fairly well spoken and intelligent, but wouldn't you know it, he was one of those people that absolutely knew everything. And since he knew everything, it was obvious that the Lord Almighty had put him on this earth to tell everybody else about everything. No matter what you were talking about, he knew more and better than you, even on matters involving your own history. Now, you wouldn't think that was possible, but by God, he had an opinion about the cafeteria in the hospital my mom worked in when I was a child, which really blew my mind. While he wasn't the first know-it-all that I had met, he had an even more annoying personality trait. Branson was a tattletale. You didn't stock the coolers before he got there, he's gonna tattle on you. Didn't clean the bathrooms before he came in, he's gonna tattle on that as well. If you didn't make more coffee or anything like that, no matter how minor or downright wrong he was, he just had to run and tell management. As such, they were just as annoyed by him as the lowly cashiers. Once he almost got me fired by telling the managers that I allowed one of my friends to steal from the store. Luckily, we were absolutely lousy with cameras, so after a few minutes of desperate pleadings for the manager to check the CCTV footage, they discovered that Branson was in fact absolutely full of it, if not lying for his own amusement. When it was proved he was wrong, did he apologize? Well, of course not. He was never wrong in all of his livelong days, because he, of course, knows everything. I was, as they say, not remotely fond of Branson. One day the store was filled with law enforcement as per usual, 2 sheriffs and 4 or 5 local city cops. It was a shift change, and my coworker and I were ready to hand off our shift to Branson. There were no other customers, so we were all just standing around talking and just enjoying a brief bit of banter. It just so happened that the sheriff's supervisor was there, and his name was Bucky. Now, Bucky was a good old boy, a salt of the earth kind of person, and one of the nicest guys you'd ever want to meet. He'd give you the shirt off of his back if he thought you'd look a bit chilly. Now, while I was chatting with some of the boys in blue, Bucky was talking to Branson. I wasn't entirely listening to their conversation until it started to go a little bit pear-shaped. Bucky was talking about something, and Branson, in his usual way, just had to start arguing with him that he was wrong, because Branson just knew that it was X instead of Y. Then he took it a step further and suggested that as a lawman, Bucky didn't have the schooling that Branson did, and it was only natural that Branson would know more about the subject. Bucky just smiled, and rather than argue, he removed himself from the conversation and walked around the counter to the other other side. He caught my eye and motioned me over. He then asked me what Branson's last name was, and not seeing any reason not to, I ended up telling him. He thanked me and drifted off into the store. I honestly did not think anything more about it, and went back to my conversation with the others. After a few minutes, Bucky walked up with a vaguely confused look on his face, and asked Branson, "Hey buddy, what is your last name again?" Branson, sounding a little annoyed, as if he were schooling a child, answered him. And again, Bucky walked back off into the store. When Bucky returned, he had a big old grin on his face. He motioned Branson to come to him from behind the counter, and he said to him, "Your name is Branson," while also saying his last name. Isn't that right? Branson once again confirmed that it was, and Bucky's grin widened even further as he reached for the handcuffs on his belt. He said to him, "I am so happy to hear that because there's a warrant out for your arrest, and I'm gonna have to take you in. I'm gonna need you to turn around and put your hands behind your back." And once that happened, all of the conversations in the store stopped completely. I exchanged a well-earned shocked Pikachu face with my coworker. The shocked expressions on our faces melted away into absolute delight as our most annoying coworker was handcuffed and taken out of the store. I never did see Branson again, but Bucky was back later that evening and apologized to me for making me stay late. I told him I didn't mind and it was all worth it for the show. I would have done it all over again just to see that idiot sabotage himself. So, as a little bit of a life tip, if you've got a warrant out for your arrest, it's probably best that you don't annoy a cop. What an absolutely amazing story. This Branson guy is not only super frustrating and annoying to deal with, but he's also a know-it-all. And I think you know that kind of person that I'm talking about. They're never wrong about everything. They always have some kind of comment waiting in the wings to share with the class, and they're always just trying to one-up everybody else. And they are absolutely obnoxious. But worst of all, this guy was secretly a criminal. He had a warrant out for his arrest, and he was clearly hiding something by trying to work at a convenience store. So with all things considered, I would also probably be super happy with my coworkers if I saw the most annoying guy in the store get arrested right in front of me. Like, that must have been a dream for the original poster. So it is truly satisfying to watch this know-it-all get put in their place, but also to see the hammer of justice slam down on somebody who absolutely deserved it. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, linked down below in the description. An entitled guest freaks out on me in the hotel lobby, making all these crazy accusations, forcing me to call the police just to try and evict him. But after they couldn't do anything about it, I was left to my own devices, nervous and scared for my life the entire night. Here's what happened. It was 2:30 a.m. on a busy Saturday morning. Friday nights are usually busy, but tonight our hotel had received all the passengers from a diverting flight. So I had just spent the last half an hour checking in 60 unhappy people and was now drowning in airline vouchers and paperwork. I step away from the front desk to use a copier, and when I return a minute later, there's a man slouched against it with a can of beer on the counter. We have a beer fridge up here, but I can't sell any after midnight. So my first words to this gentleman are to apologetically inform him that unfortunately, I can't sell alcohol this late. This is always awkward, but guests trying to wrench the door to the fridge open after hours has ruined the lock, so I get lots of practice. He tells me that the beer is his, and he just wants a new key card for his room. Okay, of course. I apologize for the misunderstanding. I can certainly get him a new key. I request his ID, explaining the policy about needing to check when I hand out keys, and he gives me his license without complaint. And then suddenly he gets really angry. Not even just a little bit angry, but incredibly angry. He was livid. He doesn't appreciate being treated this way. How dare I talk to him like this? If I'm going to talk to him like this, he's going to give it to me right back. He called me all these horrible names, says I was discriminating against him, called me a piece of garbage, and that he's going to fire me and ruin my life. And when this was happening, I was just standing there blinking. He didn't seem to mind my asking for his ID. Was it the thing about the beer? Is this a joke? No, it's not a joke. He's screaming right now. He's completely apocalyptic. I tried to apologize. I say to him, "Sir, I'm so sorry I've offended you. It was not my intention." But he was not hearing me. He starts screaming, "No, no, no." He was screaming over me. He stated that I knew exactly what I did and that now I'm in trouble and that I'm going to regret this. He's going to make sure of it. I've handed him his new key by now, and he starts towards the elevator, yelling over his shoulder at me the entire way. He's calling me so many names, and he's going to show me exactly what's going to come my way, and that I'm going to get what's coming to me. The elevator doors close on him as he screams about how much of a jerk I am, and in reality, I'm just some guy behind the front desk. At this point, I'm stunned, and my heart is too rapidly distributing adrenaline, but the puzzle is starting to come together. This guy must have been on something. Either that or he's dealing with some kind of untreated mental illness, but he had the distinctive, wiry, dental deficient look of somebody who enjoys a very specific illegal substance, so I'm betting something along those lines. And with all that in mind, my plan was just to put a note about this encounter in our daily log, but that's when the elevator doors open up. It's him again, and he's already screaming at me from across the lobby. He's calling the police. He's gonna be pressing charges. In fact, he's on the phone right now, and he says that I'm in so much trouble. I'm going to be arrested. And it was at that point that I basically came to the conclusion that yeah, this guy was seriously on something. But now it's beginning to dawn on me that I don't know exactly what this guy is capable of. He's not letting this go. There are almost 300 rooms in this hotel, but tonight I'm the only employee here, and me and this dude have the first floor all to ourselves. Usually the hotel has a security guard on night duty, but not tonight. It's just me. This really is worst case scenario. Our guest is now striding with great purpose towards the front doors, hurling invectives at me the entire way. Is he going outside to wait for the police? I can only hope. I watch him go, and I couldn't get a word in if I tried. He appears to leave, and I continue typing my now somewhat expanded log entry. A minute later, he's back, headed towards the elevator, still yelling at the top of his lungs. Now he's telling me that he's called his lawyer. He's on a plane at this very moment, coming to ruin my life. He's saying that I'm such a jerk and that my life is basically over. The elevator doors then close. Not even 3 minutes pass, and the elevator descends again, and he's back, again stalking the front doors, screaming at me at the top of his voice in the lobby. He is now starting to make me nervous. I don't think he actually ever called the police, and I'm even beginning to entertain doubts as to whether this man even has an attorney on retainer. So just what is it that's repeatedly drawing his attention outside? Why does he keep making the same trip over and over again? It almost seems like he's working himself up to something. Does he have a vehicle outside in the parking lot? Does he have something dangerous on him or something like that? My mind was racing. This continues for another 2 or 3 passes from the elevator to the parking lot and back, and my level of concern increases. With every loud ingress, I'm anticipating with growing alarm what implement of violence he might have collected during his absence. I know I need to act, but I don't know how to approach the situation. He hasn't technically done anything more than yell at me, and he is a paying customer. I try again to apologize for whatever has agitated him, but again, he drowns out my words with denials and vulgarities. A few minutes later, he storms up to the desk and throws a handful of key packets at me, containing perhaps 8 keys between them. He's clearly requested new keys a few times since checking in this afternoon. He screams that I have locked him out of his room. He paid $150 for that room, and he wants back in. He claims that I snuck up and locked him out because I'm just such a jerk, and that I had better give him new keys right now. So I numbly go through the motions of coding new keys, trying to explain that I didn't lock him out, but he proves less than receptive to my words. Some part of my shell-shocked brain is wondering how all these keys could have malfunctioned at the same time. Is he even at the right door? No, of course not, because he is whacked out of his gourd. He rips the new key packet out of my hand and takes off back up the elevator, loudly issuing proclamations about my character and impending fate. Now, I'm trying and failing to bring my focus back to the paperwork when the elevator again discharges him, now yelling something about how he's got some people coming, and when they get here, I'm in trouble. And at that point, I thought to myself, okay, that's enough. I've never evicted a guest from the hotel before. I don't even know if I'm allowed to do that. But this deranged man is now explicitly threatening me with something other than dubious legal action, and if my own safety wasn't enough of a concern, I'm also responsible for that of the property and all the other guests here. So I tell him that if he doesn't stop harassing me and return to his room, I'm gonna call the police and trespass him from the property. He loudly informs me that in fact, I will be the one leaving the property, and he then just repeats all the various things he was saying. I reply that I'm calling the police, and then I just do exactly that. He takes out his phone and starts filming me as he walks rapidly out to the parking lot. I notice that he's no longer yelling at this point. A lady answers on the other line, and I stammer out about how there's a guy at the hotel who is actively threatening me, and I think he's high on something. I suspect violence is imminent, and I would really appreciate it if a patrol unit could swing by whenever it's convenient and assist me in making him leave. She assures me that a unit is on its way. I leave a voice message for my manager explaining what I'm doing and why, and he texts me back immediately, telling me that while he's out of state at the moment, he has my back, and guests are definitely not allowed to send any kind of veiled threats towards me, so I am good to kick this guy out. Our guest makes a couple more circuits of the lobby, but now he is ostentatiously filming me with his phone and muttering about how he's got people on the way and I'm gonna find some things out when they get here. I silently assure him that we have this in common. 2 officers arrive 15 minutes later, and I'm very glad to see them. Our guest has now retired to his room, probably in anticipation of their arrival. So the cops ask me to clarify that I am formally trespassing the individual in question from the property. I confirm this and further express that I've never had to do this before, but I'm ready to cooperate in whatever capacity needed. The officer then asked me if he is a long-term tenant, because tenant laws would then be in effect. So I explained to him, no officer. He checked in yesterday afternoon and is due out today. The officers begin to put on gloves, and then the phone at the front desk rings. It's our guest's room. I pick up and our guest informs me that his friends are coming, and when they get here, I'm in trouble, while also calling me a jerk in the process. I convey all of this to the officers, and they tell me that they're going to go up to his room, and they prefer if I remain in the lobby, which I say to them, of course, go ahead, do whatever you want. Thank you again for helping me. They then depart up to the elevator. A few minutes later, the 2 officers debark from the elevator to approach me, and our guest is not with them. They tell me that our guest has declined to open the door. They knocked, but he did not answer. Is he definitely in the room? Well, yes. He literally just called the front desk phone from that room, literally as they were standing here. They then asked if I could call the room so they could then speak with him. So I do exactly that, and I hand the phone to the officer. He reports that nobody is picking up. I tell the officers that I have the master keys with me right now, and I'm more than happy to assist in getting the door open. The 2 officers exchange a look. The lead officer then informs me that our guest has a reasonable expectation of privacy as long as he's in this room, and the police department will under no circumstances violate this. And at this point, I'm just confused. I tell him that I've confirmed with the general manager of the hotel that this guest is no longer our guest. Thus, he cannot have this room any longer, and he no longer has any claim over it. And now it is the hotel's room, and the room is private property upon which this absolute psychopath is currently trespassing. I remind him that this man has repeatedly threatened me, and that I am at this very moment expecting the arrival of a group of his associates, at which time I've been assured I will be messed up, which while it is non-specific, it is surely a term implicative of danger to my person. I ask him what he's suggesting that I do about all of this. The lead officer tells me that I can follow whatever hotel policy I want, but that he is under a supervisory directive to not act or appear to act in any kind of way as an agent of a private business, so they will not be assisting me in evicting anyone. He will in fact not even go as far as to accompany me to the room, as that would constitute appearing to act as an agent of the hotel. He gives me his business card and assures me that they will intervene if our guest assaults me, and tells me that I should call the police again if I happen to see him again. And after that, they just leave. So as it turns out, our guest was kind of correct. I am in fact just a little jerk. There was nothing I could do other than try to get back to work and hope that he would leave me alone, and that his friends wouldn't roll up and try and do something to me. I guess I could have walked off the job, and maybe I should have, but I spent the rest of the night too jittery with adrenaline to concentrate, and tensing up every time the elevator door opened or the automatic door stirred. His friends never did show up, and neither did his lawyer, and he never came back down to the lobby. I guess he decided to turn in and have a restful rest of his night, secure in the knowledge that I was a jerk who could do nothing to stop him from doing whatever he wanted. Then I went home and I tried to relax, only to realize that I couldn't stop shaking, and I was way too wired to go to sleep. So honestly, I'm just really unimpressed with the way the cops acted, and I really think working at a hotel at night might be way more dangerous than it's really worth. Yeah, that sounds like an awful situation. That guy was clearly trying to troll you and mess with you, and wanted to try and rile you up, and well, it worked. It would have worked for anybody else as well. Honestly, the first time he would have started screaming would have been the only time he would have screamed at me if that was me in that situation. I would not have put up with that for a second. There's no way. I would happily get yelled at by my manager if it means that this psychopath gets away from me. Hopefully there's some kind of cameras or audio in the lobby, because there's gotta be something that can try and prove that no, you were not making this up and this guy really was acting like a psychopath. But hopefully for your own safety, this never happens again, because that guy was absolutely unhinged, and there's no excuse for the way he acted. Today, I messed up by making a decision that cost me my fiancé and my friends, and I seriously don't know what to do. My older sister has always struggled with mental illness. It didn't help that she was diagnosed with postpartum depression after her youngest was born 4 years ago. Sadly, she did unalive herself, and her kids are the ones who found her. The 7-year-old is the one who called me in tears, telling me me that mommy won't wake up, without any hesitation or even consulting with my fiancé who lived with me at the time, I ended up taking responsibility of them. I did not want them to end up in foster care, but I was not prepared for how drastically my life would change. He and I were child-free by choice. I even had my tubes tied to be sure of that. And as understanding as he was of the situation, he broke up with me and ended up moving out. He felt like this was something that he did not sign up for. Not only did I lose him, but I lost my friends too. I did not have the time to hang out or have fun with them anymore. Their answer for that was just to get a babysitter, but I had more important things to do with that money. I already paid the babysitter enough because I have to work, and my ex leaving me on the lease by myself didn't make things any easier. I have to put the kids first and try to give them as much normalcy as possible. Swapped out impromptu road trips and parties for play dates and trips to the petting zoo. And this made me become too boring for them. None of them have kids, so they did not get it. They removed me from the group chat, and I just felt like my whole world is turned upside down. Everything I knew has changed. My nephews mean a lot to me, and I want to do right by them, but I had no idea that it would be so testing. I did what I thought was best for my nephews, but I could have never imagined that I would end up feeling so alone. Honestly, I first want to say that this is no mess up on your end. People come and people go. It always depends on the circumstances of life. Usually they just kind of fade out, and in your case, it seems like it was much more abrupt. Honestly, if people can't see that you're trying to do the best thing for these kids, then they are just not good people to begin with. I mean, honestly, the fact that your friends just walked out of your life and basically treated you like some kind of boring person now is inexcusable and so toxic. So personally, I would be thinking, okay, good riddance. I don't want you around, and clearly you are not a good person. So keep doing what you're doing, because you're doing a wonderful thing, and if I was in your shoes, while it would be hard, I absolutely would do the same thing, mostly because it is the right thing to do. My entitled family treats me horribly, forcing me to work at a family business and blaming me for everything along the way. But after dealing with this for so long, I simply had enough, and I decided that it's time to get some revenge. So I go out of my way to destroy their business and get it shut down forever. Here's what happened. So for a bit of background, a few years after I started university, a friend of my mother's, who we'll call Cook, that's not their real name, started what can be generously called a restaurant in a small town a couple of hours outside of the city we lived in. It was really a glorified hot dog stand in a golf course. My mother had invested money into this business, so she had a personal stake in ensuring its success. That meant that she would often enlist us to be a waiter when she could not do it herself, and that would include my brother and myself. And let me tell you, my brother hated this guy, though I don't blame him. Cook had no idea how to run a business, and he was completely uninterested in learning. He was also completely computer illiterate and had me set up the Google account for his business. And in order for us to get to work in his business, he would pick one of us up from our home, drive us 2 hours or so out of town, and we were basically stuck there until we were driven back due to the fact that neither of us had a driver's license. And since my brother had problems with this guy, I was the one who more often than not had to spend 2 to 10 days at a time there, stuck in a barely livable house until I was let back home. My mother was no better. She would often volunteer us and tell us that we would be working 2 days in the middle of the week, making job hunting a very difficult thing for my brother and I. Furthermore, she treated us not as employees but as her children, and thus any mistake was clearly our fault, and not because neither of them could train staff, use a computer at all, manage a business in the slightest, or utilize my brother and I in the most effective way, especially considering my brother had already graduated university and I was working towards a double major in business. Furthermore, they were completely unprofessional. They would host shouting matches in Chinese where customers could hear it, and the kitchen was filthy, despite Cook's insistence that the kitchen was the cleanest place in the restaurant. Yeah, right. An ice rink was less slippery than the ground in there, and he would routinely touch cooked food after handling raw meat, and I distinctly remember sweeping up what I thought was a green bell pepper, only to realize that it was a moldy onion ring. Even the stove area was dripping with grease. Literally a giant drop landed on my arm one time. They could not train staff at all. They had hired 5 people in the first year, and none of them came back the next. Cook, in particular, was especially two-faced in how he handled customers. He would smile at them and greet them, remembering details from previous conversations, and then turn to me and say in Chinese about how they're all stupid and they're retired and they have too much time and money on their hands. All of this left a great feeling of resentment for both me and my brother. Not only was it effectively trapping us to work for this completely incompetent individual, individual, but we would basically be getting nothing out of it. This was especially frustrating for me because as a business student at the time, I could see all the places they could improve. I even offered to write up some policies, do some inventory management, and take a look at the administrative side just to help out and get some experience for myself, but they kept insisting that they didn't need it. And sure, we were paid the bare minimum, and the guy did know how to cook, but we have to bear the brunt of their frustration while hiding the fact that we were sick of helping out, and that led all the way up until we just simply couldn't do it anymore. Last year, I graduated university. It was not as happy of a time as it should have been because my grandfather passed away the week before. I couldn't even celebrate the night before I walked the stage because I had to give part of the eulogy the previous day, and I had to mediate an incident between my brother, my mother, and the cook, all because my mother simply couldn't do it. So no pre-graduation shots for me because I was stuck on the phone for 3 hours listening to how insensitive Cook was over the fact that my grandfather had just passed away. But I figured that once I walked the stage and I had my diploma in my hand, I could spend the next week or so job hunting. But that was no dice. Immediately after I graduated on Monday afterwards, my mother volunteered me once again, telling me that I had to work 10 days in that restaurant, and I lasted 6 days before the incident of this story finally happened. Now, by all accounts, it wasn't that busy of a day to start off with. There was a breakfast brunch for Father's Day that barely anyone attended, and most people that did show up wanted to order off the menu, but both Cook and my mother were incredibly stressed out, and both of them were taking it out on me. My mother spent the day micromanaging me and finding flaws in every little thing that I did, like cleaning an empty table, over clearing plates from a table out on the deck, over to not immediately refilling coffee or water when a glass or mug was half full, or just not touching a table every 5 minutes. Cook just kept shouting a lot and gave contradictory orders every 2 minutes, but it was the combination of my mother and Cook screaming at me for a mistake I didn't even make, refusing to listen to me, and Cook mocking me for breaking down in tears that made me realize that not only could I not handle it anymore, but I wanted to burn the place to the ground. I booked a flight out of the province that day and left a week later. I didn't even tell my mother when or why I left. Now fast forward to when I get some petty revenge. Remember how I said that not only were they completely unprofessional, but also completely computer illiterate? See, despite the fact that I was no longer in the province, I still had all the login information for the business. And furthermore, because I knew all the laws that he blatantly refused to learn, I then knew all the violations that he had committed in the business. So for the first part of my revenge, I signed out of his computer from my Google account. I don't think it was really necessary since he never used that computer in the first place for anything, but I wanted to make sure that he and my mother wouldn't be able to stop me from what I was gonna do. Before I left the province, I claimed the business in review sites using the email and the business phone number. Then I blasted every single review, positive or negative, with all the garbage he used to say about customers. Any negative review was immediately mocked, and any positive review was left with a note saying thank you or me calling them incredibly cheap. Any questions were met with hostility, and it basically boiled down to me saying I'm right and you're wrong. I also make mentions about how he didn't wash his hands in the kitchen, and the stuff they're yelling in Chinese are insults about uppity customers. Given that it was a tourist-based town, I'm fairly certain that the deep dip in sales that my brother mentioned later on was because of all the things that I did, and no one suspected a thing because my mother and Cook didn't know how to work the internet, and my brother didn't care enough to look up the business. Next, I meticulously documented all the complaints that I had between my brother and myself, as well as the ones from the few people Cook had hired but never kept because he could not train them. I reported the 2 times that I slipped in his kitchen, incidents where he refused to wash his hands in between handling salad and raw meat simply because it took too long, and I handed those off to the health service department. I also anonymously informed the tax revenue agency that he was severely underreporting income, as employees were instructed only to write down the credit and debit receipts to report in sales. The third part of my revenge wasn't really my part, to be honest. Rather, it was because of his own incompetence. As I said before, he was completely computer illiterate. I didn't even have to lock out the person he hired to do accounting because he didn't bother reporting his expenses except hand them a garbage bag full of receipts. To be honest, I felt kind of sorry for them, but because their hands were tied, they could not dispute any of the claims that I made. What I did do, however, was text them all the things that my mother and Cook said about them so they wouldn't even bother trying to defend him. They then quit about a month before everything went down, meaning that Cook was left holding the bag. So naturally, given that the the business wasn't making near as much money to make rent, let alone pay off all his fines, that he was being slapped down with, the government repossessed everything. From everything in the dinky little house that he was renting for business purposes to every single fork and knife that he bought. Because of all the health code violations, he couldn't find a job as a cook again, which was his only job for about 30 years. And because the tax revenue agency knew how bad he was with managing businesses, they naturally denied him when he requested a permit to open up a growing operation. As far as I know, he's no longer in contact with my family, but his brother-in-law, who is my mom's hairstylist, mentioned that he had to move somewhere else to get away from all the bad reputation. My mother mostly just got off scot-free because all the business permits were under his name, but she lost quite a lot of money, and last I heard from my family, had to move into a smaller house. And the best part about it is that no one knew that I was the one who did all of this. My brother suspected it as he relayed details of what happened to me, but I never confirmed it. But even if he did know, it's not like he would tell my parents in the first place, because he hated that place just as much as I did. As for me, I'd like to say that everything's sunshine and roses, but my decision to impulsively move provinces has had its ups and downs. I did manage to find a place to live and a place to work, so at least I'm alive and living. It is hard, but I'd rather be doing this than ever go back there. What a crazy story. You literally went out of your way to destroy that business. You seriously must have been hurt pretty badly by these people to not only report them to the state, but basically to hit them in every angle you possibly could think of. And that is awesome in my opinion, because seriously, the way they were treating you was completely inappropriate. They were taking their frustrations out on you specifically, and that's not fair for you in the slightest. Like, you did not deserve to be treated like that at all. So hopefully your mom and this cook can learn their lessons, that maybe they need to run their business a little bit better in the future. Otherwise, their careers as well as their money is just gonna go down the drain once again. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. I'm convinced that my husband has a second family with 2 other children that I don't know about, and I honestly don't know what to do. So for a bit of context, we've been married for 20 years. In 2017, I found him engaging in online affairs. Now, that's all I've found evidence of, but I've lived the entire time with the feeling that something was wrong, because everything you'd expect a remorseful person to do and think, he's the complete opposite. He's also randomly critical and impossible to get along with, and displays other behavioral red flags. So I was always suspicious, but I never could come up with anything that fit. At the end of last year, something happened and I finally zeroed in on someone. Quickly, everything began falling in place. All the questions I've had and observations about unusual behavior patterns all started to really click together. And with that, a lot of memories began resurfacing of things I didn't know the significance of at the time. It all fits. I've speculated on various possibilities in the past, but my suspicions never lasted longer than a few days. This time with this woman, it's been since October, and I haven't been able to shake it since. The more I put it together, the more it adds up. I don't have anything concrete, but I feel strongly that he's been having an on-again, off-again affair with a younger married woman and is the biological father of her 2 sons, who are about 4 years old and 2 years old. I think she was probably in the picture in 2017. I know she's not the only one. That discovery was an entirely different person, and she was one of the many online affairs. He was also on all the dating apps, but swore nothing physical ever happened. Both of the kids remind me of my son, and my 17-year-old daughter even commented on how they look weirdly like her brother when he was young. Here's the main point. Recently, I was searching for a file, and I saw the folder with Facebook data that I pulled in 2020. I found in his ad interests the words bunk bed, infant, lawyer, lawsuit, teddy bear, and motherhood, on top of a plethora of other interests. In his market searches, it goes over a bunch of children's clothes, like dino skeleton lamp, a loft bed, a student desk, Mickey Mouse pocket watch, a Catwoman costume, and here's the other kicker that comes along with it, an engagement and wedding ring. Now, mind you, our kids are fully grown. The youngest is a senior in high school, and we don't have anyone close with kids that age to buy for. And there's no way in the world he'd think of ever buying me a $4,000 bracelet. He has criticized every dime I've spent for years. And in that same vein of thought, there's no way I would ever let him buy a $4,000 bracelet. To me, this is the first concrete evidence I've found to back up my suspicions. But I've been suspicious for so long and had to accept less than satisfactory explanations for questionable things so many times that I have a hard time determining what's a big deal and what isn't. His explanation is always along the lines of saying, "Oh, I don't remember," or even even saying, "I have no idea why I would ever look at that." A couple of years ago, around the same time this was pulled, he left a tab open on his computer where he'd been looking at legal sites about divorce, specifically the laws for child support in our state. At the time, he'd been irritable, and we were arguing a lot, and I assumed he was thinking about our kids, but even that upset me, because he's always insisted that he wanted to stay married. He did then too, but said that he was just looking at it in case I decided to divorce him. About a year before that, the same thing happened, except it was adultery as grounds for divorce in our state in the search bar. He gave me the same explanation, though it never sat right for me for a few reasons. For starters, I have been the one putting all the work in to try and fix things, and he always maintained he never did anything physical, so it wouldn't even be an issue. He said he didn't know that for sure, and that's why he looked it up. There has also been 2 incidents, once in 2018 and once in 2020, where I found him looking at pregnancy-related stuff. At this point, I have reason to believe he won't ever leave me. There's no way our kids or his parents would ever be okay with it. I feel pretty sure it's all just a fantasy, largely spurred by this other lady, but it's something that he would never act on. I have no idea if or how much her husband knows about the situation. I'm also sure that my husband will continue to deny anything he hasn't already confessed to, and that he feels both trapped in the affair and in the marriage, and in guilt, shame, and lies, and isn't brave enough to do anything to get out of it. That doesn't mean I want to stay married if this is true. I would forgive him for anything if he just showed me true remorse for it. But if it comes to that, he is honestly past hope, and so is our marriage. He knows of my suspicions and claims he's never spoken to that woman but like 3 times. They attended the same church as us, and he always refers to her as that woman, as if I'm questioning him like he's Bill Clinton or something. I then asked him that if that whole family moved away tomorrow and you never saw or heard of them ever again, would it have any impact on his life? He said without hesitation, "I would not care at all if I never saw them again. It makes no difference to me." The man I married would not have been able to speak a lie of that caliber without emotion giving it away. So now I'm honestly at a loss, and I seriously don't know what to do. This is seriously a sticky situation, because it sounds like this guy is absolutely gaslighting you, and you've already caught him once talking to women online, which is not okay in the slightest. And sure, all you have right now are just assumptions about his character and what he's actually doing, so it's hard to pinpoint if he's telling the truth or if any of this is even real in the first place. But I mean, a lot of the stuff really does point to him basically cheating on you. I mean, the pregnancy stuff, as well as the stuff about the toys, as well as about how he can get divorced and basically get away with all of this or something along those lines. I mean, it all is super sketchy, so it honestly makes sense that you would be suspicious. So it's hard to say what you really should do. There are 2 possibilities. Either he's telling the truth and this is all just a weird circumstance, or he really is cheating on you and he really does have a second family. I think if you really wanted to get to the bottom of this, you could hire a private investigator, but if there's nothing that comes out of it and he finds out, it could eventually lead to some more friction in your marriage. So hopefully, regardless of what you decide to do, it all works out for you. Because based on what you've described, this definitely does not sound like a good situation. And hopefully for your sake, as well as your kid's sake, your husband isn't cheating on you with another woman. My boyfriend broke up with me because I am having trust issues with him, and I want to go back and have a second chance with him, but I'm just not sure if that's a good idea, and I seriously don't know what to do. So my boyfriend and I were together for 4.5 years. We only saw each other once a week due to distance and schedules. My relationship was far from perfect, but we loved each other from the day we first met and understood each other in ways others never could. Still, we're both very stubborn and always wanted to be right, but most times it didn't get in the way. The major problem we had was this female friend of his, whom I suspected was trying to get with him. He always defended her, thinking I was simply being jealous, until she told him that she liked him. They were apart for some time, and he didn't tell me for a couple of months. I was mad he didn't tell me, but things went back to normal. Eventually, she started being even more obvious, and I warned him, but he didn't believe me until she tried to get him to spend some quality time with her, if you know what I mean. He lied to me about where he was, spent time alone with her after that, as well as many other things, and only told me about it a few days later. Allegedly, he wanted to tell me face to face, but it just didn't happen. I was so hurt, and my trust issues came back. He eventually cut contact with her, and we created some boundaries, and I gave him this second chance. Things went fine during summer vacations, but in September he went back to college, and I had to adjust to her existence again. The first time he went out with his friends, there were some minor issues that we sorted out, but these little things got to me and made me crazy worried about what could happen, to the point point that I got angrier and angrier with her presence. Whenever he hung out with that friend group, I would get mad or sad pretty much no matter what happened. And whenever there was any sort of problem, I talk about everything all over again. And this last month, whenever something went wrong, I would almost always bring up how I couldn't fix my trust and that maybe it was easier if we just broke up. He then tried telling me that this was being unfair, as he had indeed changed his behavior and in the process even damaged other friendships just to make things better for me. He said that I needed to work on my trust, but I never listened because I was too focused on the fact that he hurt me and messed up before. Last month, it was the girl's birthday and he texted her and said it was to be respectful and to make sure his friends won't pull apart even more. Even though I understood what he meant, I felt like it was too much and I felt like he was hiding something and ended up asking to see his phone. He gave it to me, but I felt guilty and I just couldn't do it. Then he said I felt like we needed to either break up, which we both didn't want, so we chose to get some space and only act like friends for a while. We were out together supposedly as friends this weekend when we started to fight, and I did many of the things I said before. He broke up with me, he felt like his efforts weren't appreciated, my lack of trust was a big issue, and all the instability was hurting him. I did not see the effort he was putting into making things better until we broke up. It all dawned on me after that. After reflecting, I realized I wasn't a good girlfriend this last few months. I used to do a whole lot of little things to make him happy that I just stopped doing because I was too self-absorbed on the idea that he was going to mess up again. I did feel the instability, but in my mind, he messed up first, so he was to blame for all of it. I know I never gave us a fair chance after what happened by acting the way that I did, but he told me that besides this, there really weren't any other problems. We decided to remain friends, but as he needed time, I promised I wouldn't contact him until April 15th, that being the day we're supposed to meet up so that I can return him some of his things. I'm starting therapy to help with my trust issues again this week, and to help understand the reasons behind the rest of my attitude towards him and our problems. Right now, I decided on at least asking for a second chance. Besides fixing my issues and waiting, is there anything I could still do? Should I keep my promise and not contact him until April 15th? What if he texts me? I mean, how should I even act in that situation? Should I ask for a second chance that day if I feel I can act better than before, or should I ask him later? What should I do? In my opinion, I don't think this is a good relationship. Your boyfriend not only really did mess up, but also you seem to be obsessing over the fact that he messed up. And yeah, towards the second half of your relationship, I can definitely see where there would be tension when he's trying to make things right, but at the end of the day, he did mess up first, and you did give him a second chance. So I really do see both of you at fault. Like, honestly, you both need to work on stuff. But in that same vein of thought, I think it's time to let this relationship go and move on. You two are clearly incompatible, and you both are not going to work out in my opinion. And this honestly should have ended a lot sooner. So in my opinion, if I was in your shoes, I would not be looking to try and get back with this guy. I think you just need to let it go and get it over with quickly. That way you can mourn your loss and prepare to move forward with your life. Because honestly, this doesn't seem like a good relationship. And I think you can find someone who will treat you a lot better and will be much more compatible for you in the future. An entitled new employee tries to boss me around, claiming that he's gonna get my car towed because I parked in a spot that he didn't like. And as a result, he was completely embarrassed in his first day interview, and I couldn't be more happy to watch someone get put in their place. Here's what happened. So I work for a company whose offices are located in 3 adjacent residential apartments. We installed 2 doors in between to create one big sprawling office. There isn't much parking because it is a residential area, so employees are allowed to park in the no parking signed area. This keeps our neighbors happy that we don't use all the spots available, and maintenance can ask us to move if they need to get into one of those areas. The first 2 apartment doors have signs directing customers. The 3rd door is not marked because it houses the corporate officers that don't deal with any kind of customers, and I just so happen to work in that 3rd office. We also have an extremely casual dress code. I'm getting out of my car one morning and collecting my soda, lunch, and everything I need when I hear a voice behind me saying to me, "You can't park there." I turn around and I see a man leaning outside against the wall playing on his phone. I thought that maybe he was some kind of third-party vendor waiting for maintenance to unlock the door I was blocking. So I said to him, "Is maintenance on its way to let you in?" The man then looks at me and says, "What are you talking about? The sign says no parking. That means you can't park here." I figured he was a new tenant in the building and continued to just walk into the building. I said to him, "I actually am allowed to park here. It leaves more open spaces for residents. Have a good day." This guy then seriously steps in front of me, looks at me and says, says, "You need to move your car or you will be towed." And at this point, I'm kind of weirded out. So I say to him, "Excuse me, I work here and I am allowed to park here. Please move out of my way." The man then looks at me and says, "We'll see about that." He then marches through the door ahead of me and starts walking to the offices. I follow him up the hallway, but stop at the third door, unlock it, and walk into my office area. After lunch, the general manager came in and grabbed my keys to move my car. And mind you, this happens all the time, so I didn't give it a second thought. That afternoon, the general manager brings the new employee into my office to introduce him to me. I'm the financial controller and the human resources part of the management team. I stand up and hold my hand out to the man, whose face is completely drained of color. He stammers out that it's nice to meet me and hands me all of his new hire paperwork. I ask him to sit down, and the general manager leaves him with me to get set up on the systems and explain his privileges, as well as everything else with the job. The man then says, "Excuse me, I need to step out for a moment to the restroom." And as he leaves, the general manager comes back into the office and sits down with a big smile. I look at him and I say, "I think he's a little embarrassed. He yelled at me for parking this morning." The general manager then says, "Yeah, it's a little more than that. He came in an hour before we scheduled him this morning and blustered to the receptionist about you for half an hour before I went out and got him started filling out paperwork just to try and shut him up." I explained our parking policy to him in orientation and explained our towing procedures. I caught him at the break saying that he wouldn't tolerate illegal parking and would get this place in line now that he was here. We happened to walk by the parking stickers as we were showing him around, and sure enough, he took the bait and swiped one. I called the tow company and warned him that he might call and to just play along but not to send anyone. As soon as he tagged your car, I moved it to an empty garage. And it was right about this time the guy comes back in looking like he saw a ghost. He looks at me and says, "Ma'am, I don't know how to tell you this, but I had your car towed. I'm so sorry. I'll pay for the charges and go get it right now." The general manager then looks at him and says, "What do you mean? Who gave you the number for the towing company?" The man then confessed that he got it off the parking stickers in the closet. The general manager then questions him even further. He says to him, "Who told you to sticker cars? This isn't even your area." And at this point, I thought the man was going to start melting into the floor. He said, "I'm so sorry. I just thought she was lying about working here. She went into the apartment, not the office. She wasn't in dress clothes. I don't know. I thought I could catch the truck before it came, but her car is gone." Now at this point, I was having a hard time keeping a straight face through this, and probably looked mad due to the strain of not laughing. The general manager then said to him, "Well, maybe this will teach you not to assume you know how things should be run. You were running your mouth all day long about all the things that you are going to change, and you didn't listen when I explained our parking and towing policies. Now I'm going to go get her car out of the garage I parked it in, and you are going to get set up on the system. Maybe tomorrow you will come in with a better attitude." He looked relieved and also miserable to be chastised on his first day, so I got him set up and even had him laughing by the end. He showed up the next day with a soda for me and a much better attitude overall, so thankfully it seems like he learned his lesson. Wow, talk about making a horrible impression on the first day. Can you imagine how embarrassing that would be to not only act like some know-it-all, but to then do that to the person who runs the HR department, as well as the general manager? Like seriously, you have to be a complete moron to do that. Like on the first day of work, you don't start going around and acting like you're gonna change everything about the office. You have gotta feel it out first. You've gotta figure out what the culture is and everything else. So honestly, this guy had it all wrong. He was doing everything incorrectly on your first day of work, and seriously, he needed this reality check. So hopefully for the rest of his time working there, he has a better attitude moving forward, because otherwise, I seriously don't think he's gonna last very long in the slightest. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. This next story came from the Am I the Jerk podcast subreddit. Check the links in the description if you'd like to submit your own story. Am I the jerk for ghosting my friend because I was jealous of her? So to start out, for some context, we have to go back a few years when I was in the 8th grade. In the beginning of the year, I'm in my tech class and seated at a neighboring table from this girl who we will call Linda. Linda is not her real name. We exchanged a few looks as our teacher was explaining his class. This continued until we started our first project. Me being a very friendly and talkative person, I was making some small talk with her, asking her what her last name was, what her favorite subject was, so on and so forth. This continued for the next few days. Then I introduced some of my current friends to her. We all got along and basically became one giant friend group. Things seemed pretty well overall. The only thing being was that my parents were a bit skeptical about her at first. And whenever I would talk to Linda about her childhood, it would get confusing with her living with her dad dad and having problems with her mom. I won't go into details for the sake of privacy, but just know that it was complicated. Nevertheless, I continue to hang out with her, and the rest of our friend group and my parents were okay with it, as long as I followed some typical behavioral rules. Fast forward a few months, and she invited us over to her house a few times. We could walk there since it wasn't too far from our school, and everything was perfectly fine. We would hang out at the park, at the school, you know, the usual stuff. Now here's where things start to take a turn. She confesses that she is kind of falling for me, and this is around 7-ish months after we first met. I was very scared at first, and I didn't know what to do. I later found out that she was talking to a person that moved out of our school a few years back. We'll call her Amelia, that's also not her real name. And it turns out that Linda and Amelia were talking in private about the situation, and Amelia blackmailed her into confessing to me, which is very wrong, but I see the situation that she's stuck in. Linda was worried that this was going to ruin our relationship as friends. I left her in the dark until the next day of school, when I had this conversation with her about how this doesn't really change anything, but however, in my mind, I was freaking out. Fast forward another month, and all of us are happily hanging out together during graduation when we move on to our high school years. During the summer, things start to get a little strange. Normally during the summer, I kind of ghost my friends since none of them talk about anything of interest except for homework. This summer was the exception, and I was hanging out with them a few times. We headed to Dunkin' Donuts one day when Linda was treating everybody to some donuts. I just sat there in the corner and she didn't even acknowledge me. I just sat normally at a different table since I didn't have any money on me. Another one of my friends finally noticed I was gone and she treated me to a donut. I still thank her for that. Then Linda says that she is starting to like this girl, who I'm gonna call as Layla, all while completely ignoring the fact that I was standing 3 feet away from her. It was as if I was invisible. I then spent the rest of the day there and finally go home after that, sleeping on the events that just happened. I know Layla a little. She was a shy girl and was in a corner for most school events. That's all I really know. Another time we were at the park and they were starting to talk about topics that made me feel a little uncomfortable, if you know what I mean. And they started to do things that didn't make me feel very nice. I called my mom and she pretty much picked me up soon after that. Eventually, I was starting to break away from everybody. And fast forward another month and it's the beginning of the school year. Linda then announced that she and Layla were dating. This was a shock to me, and once again, I was invisible to her. I tried to hang out together with the rest of the group, but it was weird for me with Layla around. It got so bad to the point where another one of my friends noticed and gave me false information about a carnival hangout that we had planned. Things between me, Linda, and Layla were kind of getting awkward. Then, all of a sudden, I am kicked out of our Discord group chat. I try to get back in, and apparently Linda is mad at me. It turns out she completely changed her pronouns, which I was completely unaware of at the time and wasn't happy with me about that. It takes a while, but this is where the final straw comes in. Amelia sent me a large text message which says the following: "You suck. You think you can just ask to join back into the server when you don't even talk that much and still consider us your friends?" All while throwing a variety of cuss words at me. Now, I was beyond upset. I ended up blocking Amelia and Linda, since she was the one that told her about the situation in the first place. Another one of her friends, who was actually nice to me, gave me one last chance to join the Discord group again, but I refused. I did not want to be part of a friend group that insulted me at every turn they got, and that is where everything fell apart. Since Amelia was at another school, staying away from her wasn't a problem, but with Linda, all I do now is keep my head down around her and pass by, not giving her any looks or side eyes. Now, Linda was falling back on grades and has gone full emo over the next 2 years. I don't know what to do anymore. I usually am not the one who holds grudges and stays angry, but with there being one person that I feel like I wronged, I'm wondering if I should make things right. If you think of it, Linda really didn't do anything wrong. It was me who just decided to block her without good reason. My parents are unsure, but my gut is telling me I should. What should I do? First off, I want to say that this friend group sounds really toxic. Like, these do not sound like very good people in the slightest. And it sounds like they were ready to kick you to the curb at a moment's notice. And that's not fair for you in the slightest. So if anything, maybe look at this as a blessing in disguise. You are officially out of that drama, and you don't have to deal with that anymore. And sure, you could probably go back to Linda and apologize or something along those lines, but I bet you it's only gonna rekindle some kind of weird fire in them, and they're just gonna treat you like garbage again. So if I was in your shoes, regardless of what you choose to do, I would think about myself first. I would ask myself the question, does this friend group make me happy? And are these people even my friend in the first place? If the answer is yes to both of those, then sure, give it another try. But if you seriously answer answer no to either of those questions to yourself, then maybe it is time to think really hard about your situation and try and figure out if these people are good for you in the first place. My boss is forcing me and 2 other people to cancel a trip that we have planned for since before the pandemic, and I'm honestly so frustrated and I don't know what to do. So to start off, I've been a member of my university choir for 6.5 years. This choir was my safe space and helped me get through a lot of stress during my college life, which was also the time we were scheduled to go on tour to Italy for a choir festival. I have carried this choir on my back during the pandemic, trying to prevent us from falling apart, and I stayed president up until my last semester, which was fall of 2022. My friend, let's call her Stacy, had stepped up to the plate of presidency after I had left and has done an amazing job. Now onto the issue at hand. Stacy had given me the opportunity to work at a singer at a dinner show that portrayed our culture. I have been working with them for 7 months now. My other friend, Anastasia, had also just auditioned recently to work with us. Anastasia is also in the choir. The problem I am having is that the 3 of us are the returnees in the group, meaning that the other 3 girls are new and need guidance from their section to perform their parts to the highest of standards. Our boss refuses to approve our leave for this trip because they believe that our job should be our life. Nothing is more important than this job. We will be gone for 2.5 weeks, and there are only 2 other singers at work who would cover. There's also a rule that only 1 person can request leave at a time. I had to talk to the other singers, and they said that they would be able to handle it, especially since Anastasia will only be gone for 1 week. She will not be staying for the whole tour due to family issues. My issue, I guess, is that my boss expects us to cancel something that we've been working really hard on, and it's something that we've planned for and we were looking forward to for 4 years now. And this is all with a choir that we've dedicated so much to in the last 5 years, and they want us to cancel that over a job that I just got last year? It is seriously not fair. And also, I only work at most 2 nights a week. One of the people going on tour will only be gone for a week, so she will be back working and isn't planning on staying for the duration of the trip. It's all so very frustrating, and I seriously don't know what to do. Your boss sounds like an absolute jerk. You spend all these years working on something that's important to you just for your boss basically to get in the way, and that is not fair in the slightest. And it sounds like you have coverage for the most part for your job. Like you have 2 people there that are going to be able to handle the demands of your employment pretty easily while you're away. And also, how can they not understand that this is a big deal? Like you're literally going to do something that is once in a lifetime, and you've waited 4 years to do it and have wanted to do this for such a long time. So seriously, I would go on this trip and not worry about that in the slightest. You can always find another job in my opinion, because from the sounds of it, this boss is very entitled, and it doesn't sound like they're a good boss in the slightest. So if I was in your shoes, I would be going on that trip regardless. And if I have a job coming back or not, that doesn't really matter to me. I'm not going to miss out on this once in a lifetime opportunity just to work at a job that I'm only there for maybe 2 nights a week. And if it seriously goes south, then guess what? You can find another job. And I bet you'll find one that has a much more reasonable manager that will at least let you do these cool things and not try and talk you out of it. And all under the guise that they don't have enough people to cover work while you're gone. Today, I messed up by quitting my dream job that I worked over 3 years to get. And now I feel like a complete failure and I don't know what to do. So as the title suggests, I just quit the police academy a few days ago, and I'd worked so hard to get there. I quit because I think I was having serious anxiety issues, as well as doubts about my happiness in the job. I was fine until a few weeks ago when I started having very negative thoughts about the job, and then I learned we were going to be CS gassed. Part of the training was slightly hazing in the first few weeks. It took me into a primal place in my brain where I felt like an animal and I was not myself anymore. I am 26 and recently married with no children. My wife has been amazing and supported me through whatever I have decided to do. I think that my stress and worry is rubbing off on and affecting her though. I am stressed because I really had no backup plan. I have enough emergency money to pay rent and food for the next few months, and I know I can get a new job, and I am actively searching right now. I am mainly stressed out because I have no idea what in the world I want to do with my life anymore. I spent the last 3 years working security and going through the process of becoming a police officer. Right now, I just want to get a good career going that pays a decent $60,000 a year because I prefer to just live comfortably. I have an associate's of general arts degree and was thinking about going into accounting or another business major and working my way through school in a normal job. I feel I have let my family and friends down for giving up on what I thought was my dream. I honestly feel ashamed and I feel like a failure, and I seriously don't know what to do. I don't think this is a bad thing in the slightest. Sure, Sure, it took you a long time to try and get this job, but the second you get in the police academy, you realize, oh wait, no, I don't want to do this. This is not for me, and this is absolutely something I don't want in my life. And honestly, if you were stressed out during the training, my guess is that you're probably going to be overwhelmed on the job. Just imagine what it's going to be like as a police officer if you're faced with some kind of danger and that fight or flight kicks back in right when you're on the job. Like, that seriously would be very scary, and it's honestly a good thing that you're taking this so seriously. So I wouldn't feel ashamed or too bad on yourself in the slightest. You did the best that you could, and you actually did get into the police academy in the end, and you actually gave it a try, which is a lot more than a lot of people can actually say. So just to reiterate, you didn't mess up, you're not a failure, and honestly, you're only human. Things happen in life and you can't always foresee what's gonna go wrong, but at least this is a good opportunity for you to reevaluate your life. Whether that means going back to school or doing something else, you now know what you don't want to do. And hopefully for the sake of you and your family, you're able to find something that you do enjoy that won't cause you any panic and will be something that's more up your alley. My partner gets rejected by just about everybody he ever meets. And in fact, he just doesn't have very many friends in the first place. And it's really starting to bother me and I don't know what to do. So my partner didn't really have any friends before meeting me in university. He was kind of friends with some of the nerdy kids in grade school, but I guess at one point they all shunned him and no one wanted to be friends with him. So he was alone until he moved away for university. As far as I know from his family and cousins, he never did anything to deserve the treatment that he got. He did really well in school. He was the state triple jump champion. He's quite attractive, and generally he's a very sweet and calm person. Then he met me and my friends group during university. We are all, except for him, either gay or lesbians. He was always a great friend to us and was basically our protector when we went to straight bars or to the clubs. He never tried to make a move on any of us and was always a great conversationalist as well as a super smart guy. We all assumed and we really couldn't believe that we were his first real friends. We even set him up with girls and he had a couple of relationships. Eventually, all the partying caught up with him and he figured that all the drinking and all the other substances were common with our friends and it wasn't really for him. Since that came about, we started our relationship and it's hard to imagine why he didn't have any friends growing up. He has basically been the perfect partner to me. He's become quite successful without much effort. He's a board member of a charity. He's really active and has a lot of different interests. But what I've noticed is that over and over again, he tried to make friends with people he meets through his interests or also through work. And he's either basically shut down right away or over time, they have said or done things to him that make him realize that he has yet again been excluded intentionally. The most recent example was that of a group of his coworkers planned to go to a UFC event in Vegas without saying anything to him. And he is probably the biggest fan of that in this office. We go 2 to 3 times a year because he gets tickets and a backstage pass, basically because of his board position. Well, it was quite a surprise to him to see a bunch of his coworkers who essentially hid from him that they were going to the event. One of them said to him, "Oh, we didn't know that you'd be up for a trip like this," despite my partner telling them in the past that he'd get them tickets if they wanted to go with him. This is just one example of what I am feeling like is some kind of pattern. I don't understand what's going on, but it is starting to make me wonder if there is something about him that I just don't see, or if he's acting differently when he's not around me. I've even started noticing this with my other family members. Despite my partner having basically renovated our entire house by himself and him having a master's in engineering, I see no one in the family asking him for advice or for any kind of help with any DIY projects, despite him offering to help multiple times. My brother-in-law even paid money to a contracting company who massively overcharged him, and their engineers made a couple of errors that my partner eventually caught. I eventually asked my parents if there was anything wrong with him that I'm just not seeing, and all they could really say was, "Oh, don't be silly, he's fine." Yet I've heard many times my father extol what a great guy my sister's husband is, despite him being the stereotypical used car salesman. Really though, I feel so lucky to have met this guy, and I can see it hurts him the way people treat him, despite what he projects outwardly. I don't know what to do, because the more and more I see this, the thought creeps in my mind that something must be wrong for people to act the way they do towards him, and I just can't seem to wrap my head around it, and I don't know what to do. This is a really strange situation, because it sounds like your partner really is a good person, but then when you're not with them, everybody else kind of just shuts him down. So either everybody is just super jealous of him and they don't want him in their group, or he's doing something that's putting people off. But it really seems kind of arbitrary, and it doesn't seem very clear-cut in the slightest. So maybe just pull pull over like a family member or one of your friends and pull him to the side and be like, hey, what do you think of my partner? Like, what's going on? Why is he not included in anybody's groups? Because there has to be something happening for everybody to just be rejecting him left and right. So hopefully something can be done where you can find the truth, because this definitely seems really sketchy, and with all things considered, it really just doesn't make sense why everybody around him would just immediately reject him and decide that they don't want him in their group. An entitled crazy flat earther tries to convince me that the earth is flat, but after 2 hours of him rambling on about his beliefs, despite the fact that I never asked him about it, I had simply had enough. Here's what happened. Okay, we've all heard about flat earthers, but if you're even remotely sane and reasonable, you probably think that it's just some very elaborate inside joke that people keep perpetuating because they find it amusing to do so. And you know what? That's what I thought as well. But this is when Gary enters the scene. Gary is not their real name, but he was staying at the hotel with his teenage son for the weekend. They had a weekend trip planned and were in the area, so they needed a place to stay. Gary was a pretty unassuming guy at first glance, and his son had that impatient silence about him that most teenagers have. But otherwise, everything is a-okay. I come in the next morning to relieve the night auditor, and Gary is standing at the desk, talking passionately about something. The night auditor made eye contact with me in a way that basically said, oh my gosh, please help me. But I silently giggled and continued into the office, where I overheard Gary say something about sun rotation and Earth as a plane. I assumed he was poking fun at the flat Earth idea and joking about the entire thing. 5 minutes later, the night auditor walked back into the office with a handful of papers and stared at me unblinkingly as he ripped them up and shoved them into the garbage. He gave me my report and then told me good luck as he left. And I thought that was it. It seemed that Gary had gone up to his room, so I thought honestly nothing of it. 10 minutes later, he comes back down to the desk and introduced himself. So I say, hi, nice to meet you, I guess. I didn't know what he expected me to say, and honestly, as it turns out, I didn't have to say anything. He could speak more than enough for both of us. He began to talk about the basics of flat earth theory, and I laughed about it and shook my head a bit. I thought he was joking, but as he kept going, I realized he was completely and utterly serious, and the mirth in my eyes turned to horror. Gary barely stopped for a breath. It took me a minute to tune back into what he was saying after the realization that he was serious hit me. He starts pulling out these resources. He was obviously very well prepared for this, and I'm not talking about a couple of random sources that he mentioned in passing here or there. I'm talking Bible verses, mathematical equations, diagrams, drawings, websites, YouTube videos, measurements, tools, and so much more. My hope withered more and more with each new resource he presented to me, and I found myself stuck in a place where I really did not know what to do, and I seriously just wanted him to stop. But he still kept going, and I seriously cannot believe how weird he was. So going on, he showed me clips of videos, he drew pictures as he was explaining, he worked out the mathematical equations in front of me and explained every step. He wrote down a dozen URLs for me to look into, and he referenced specific Bible verses and emphasized the word choice in them. It went on and on. At this point, it's been an hour and a half, and I've tried to walk away about a dozen times. So I eventually just said to him, I have to work now, and I went to sit in the office and tried extremely hard to look busy, but he just kept talking. Every time I had to go out to the front desk, he had something to show me. Every time I walked back into the office, he spoke more clearly so I could hear him. I eventually asked him why people don't fall off the earth if it's flat, and he said that there's a great ice wall surrounding the edges of the earth. I asked why it's not common knowledge, and he says that the ice walls are guarded by a branch of the military, and they make people turn around before they can see the walls. He said that this information is kept under wraps because the government doesn't want to admit that they're using so many resources to guard these walls, because according to him, if everyone knew about it, there would be a riot. I managed to grimace a smile out of my mouth as I politely nodded my head. I thought maybe he would leave sooner if it looked like that I believed him, and honestly, I didn't really want to antagonize a weirdo when I was alone in a hotel. I just tried to go along with it. He then told me that he's saving up for a sophisticated camera so that he could have photographic evidence of the earth being flat. This guy was saving up over $1,000 for a camera just to try and prove that the earth was flat? I mean, come on. Eventually, a big group of people came to check out, and he finally walked away. He came back about 10 minutes later and said to me,
You know, most people don't have an open mind like you do. I'm glad you're so willing to learn and consider new information. Can I take a picture with you?
And as he raised his phone camera up to snap it, I shouted at the top of my lungs, no. A million mental images of my face appearing on flat earth websites and social media pages images flashed before my eyes, and I was nearly frozen in fear. And while he was disappointed, he did leave nonetheless. 20 minutes later, I have a guest come to the front desk and say to me, "Excuse me, miss, I'm sorry to bother you, but there's a man outside harassing people. He's out there shouting about planets and ice walls, and he's screaming this to anyone who walks by." I let out a deep sigh and I looked at him. I lowered my voice and I said, "Sir, he stood here and preached the same thing to me for over 2 hours. If he isn't following people into their cars or hurting them, there's not a whole lot I can do. I'm not going to invite that man back inside." Thankfully, the guest understood and assured me that he was just standing out there preaching and not actually hurting or stalking people. But man, what a day. After that altercation, I was just shocked to realize that flat earthers aren't just part of an inside joke. They are, in some cases, very serious. Yeah, that guy is actually crazy, because every ounce of science points to the earth being round. You have to be either ignorant or just a seriously misguided individual to actually come to the conclusion that the earth is flat and that the government is hiding it from all of us. And Gary in this story seriously needs to get a reality check. But even that, if he really did just think that the earth is flat and that's some kind of weird core belief that he has, then go for it. He's wrong, but go for it. Who cares? It's the fact that he was trying to push this on somebody else, as well as disrupting their ability to do their job. That, in my opinion, is right where he crossed the line, and he seriously should not have wasted everybody's time. Because the poor original poster just wants to do their job. They don't want to be preached to. They don't want to listen to your misguided theories and watch you try to do pretend math. Like, seriously, get a life. So hopefully, for the sake of the original poster, they don't have to deal with anything like this ever again. Because what they dealt with was absolutely ridiculous. And that guy was completely out of line. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. My boyfriend's family doesn't want me around anymore, and it's all so confusing and I really don't know what to do. So I've been dating my boyfriend for about 6 months, and we have been official for about 4. Our relationship started out great. I got along with his aunt and uncle well, whom he lives with as well, and they were very welcoming to having me in their home at first and letting us hang out there. My boyfriend doesn't drive. His aunt and uncle are fine with driving him to work and appointments, but pretty much nowhere else. Due to this, it's just been a lot easier for me to go over there if we want to hang out. Recently, I had a day off, so I thought it would be nice to give my boyfriend's uncle a break and go pick up my boyfriend from work. We got back to his house and no one was around, so we hung out in his room till we heard someone come in. We went downstairs only to get yelled at by his uncle. I decided to go home, only for his uncle to get offended I wasn't staying for dinner. Now, since this incident, they've made it clear that though I'm invited for dinner every night, I am no longer welcome at their house outside of dinner. They stated that I'm only invited for dinner because they feel bad I don't have family here. I wasn't even allowed to stay later till the rows were plowed during a freak snowstorm and was forced to drive home in near blizzard conditions. Now, I try to be courteous when I'm there, and I try to be polite, ask them about their lives and clean up after myself, and I also bring them wine in once in a while as a thank you, and I drive my boyfriend around a lot to try and give them a break. I genuinely appreciate them cooking as well as everything, but his aunt and uncle are very protective of him and have done everything for him since his dad passed away a few years ago. They let him move in, they cook for him, they clean for him, they got him jobs, and I feel like this could be part of the issue. So it's really a weird situation, and I honestly don't know what to do. Your boyfriend's family seems really toxic, and they're also really sheltering your boyfriend in a bad way. For some context, the original poster's boyfriend is 24 years old, and on top of that, they don't drive, nor do they take care of their own cooking and cleaning and all this other stuff, which honestly, by that age, you really should have that figured out. It's also crazy to me that they wouldn't let you stay over during a snowstorm. Like, that is not only really dangerous, but it's also incredibly irresponsible. And if I was in your shoes, I probably would not want to go over there anymore, especially with your boyfriend basically being babied and having everything taken care of. If he really cared, he would stand up for you and say, "Hey, wait a second, there's a snowstorm going on outside. She's absolutely staying until it clears up. And also, you're not obligated to eat at your aunt and uncle's house. The fact that you left because they were freaking out and yelling at each other is, in my opinion, completely reasonable. And for them to get offended by you not wanting to stick around in that kind of hostile environment is really weird in my opinion. So I think maybe it's time to have a serious conversation with your boyfriend, because his aunt and uncle are being really weird towards you, and it's honestly time for something to change. My husband cheated on me when I was pregnant and lied to me repeatedly for years, and at this point, I seriously don't know what to do. So before my husband met me, he was in a serious 3-year relationship. She cheated on him and would gaslight him when he tried to investigate. He eventually was able to find proof before ending things and moving on. When we met, he told me that cheating cheating was a big insecurity for him, and he had trust issues as a result. I promise him that I was not designed that way and that everyone deserves to be treated with kindness and respect. I promise him for as long as we're together, I would remind him just how amazing of a man he was. And I did just that for 9 years without fault. My husband has clearly expressed over the years how I helped him overcome this trauma and showed him what an amazing man he truly is. And our lives and personal lives have never been better, honestly. Also, during this time, he's talked about how dishonorable cheating is. He calls cheaters the scum of the earth. I've listened to rants and tirades about the kind of people cheaters must be. He has made his feelings about cheating very clear at this point, and I definitely was on board with him in that regard. He started streaming video games at the same time I got pregnant. He was staying up until middle hours of the night without ever coming to bed. He was very disengaged with me during my pregnancy. He was rude, thoughtless, and frankly inconsiderate to my needs as a wife, as well as a pregnant mother to his unborn child. This behavior only got worse, and I knew something was wrong because it was so unlike him. But lo and behold, it was because he was cheating on me. He was selectively deleting his search history and only leaving things he wanted me to see. However, Google activity tracks everything, and he wasn't deleting that actively, which showed me what was really happening. It showed him creeping on scandalous fan profiles, if you know what I mean, that only certain people can access. He would then go to promiscuous streamer channels while they were live and engage with female content creators, looking into several shady and promiscuous Reddit pages, and this went on for 2 years. I tried to put an end to things without directly calling his character into question. I would ask him what he was doing late at night, and he denied any wrongdoing. I asked him to be respectful of me and not look at promiscuous female streamers, and he said of course. He would then go back to his search history weeks after the fact sometimes, and still keep deleting things out of there that he thought would make him look poor. The entire time, he promised and reassured me that our boundaries were clear and he was being faithful. He spent 2 years lying to me directly to my face. He would gaslight me time and time again, and every time this happened, a piece of me would really fall apart. After 2 years, my hope that I would suddenly become interesting enough came to a close. I finally confronted him. He tried to gaslight me again. After his ridiculousness subsided, we had the chance to talk, and he admitted to me that he cheated. He won't give me details to the extent of what happened. He just keeps saying that everything I've brought forward to him is the extent of what fully happened. It's been a month, and he keeps reminding me about how he knows he messed up and will spend the rest of our lives fixing it with me. He tells me he knows how I feel and why I now feel insecure in our marriage and my trust with him. He says he understands when I tell him that now I feel less attractive. I just can't move on. I just don't know how someone whose heart was so broken from being cheated on is capable of doing that exact same thing to the woman of his dreams and mother of his child. What should I do? First off, this is an awful situation. Here you have a husband that you thought was going to be dedicated to you, but he's clearly been messing around and chatting with other women online, as well as going to sketchy promiscuous sites that really are not a place that a married man should be going to. So there's really no good excuse in my book that would excuse this type of behavior. Like, it's seriously messed up and you definitely deserve a lot better than that. So hopefully you're able to find some kind of solution with this, because you said it right. This guy had already been cheated on. He knows exactly how painful this is for someone. And the fact that he would do that to you still, even after all these years, is in my opinion a massive red flag that you absolutely should not ignore. My coworker and I had to escort a drunken man back to his hotel room after he had one too many drinks and couldn't find his way out of the stairwell, and it honestly was pretty funny overall. Here's what happened. Last night was one of the more interesting nights I've had at a hotel, and I honestly blame it on the full moon. I've gotten liars, I've gotten complainers, I've gotten the unprepared and the faulty equipment. I've also got the booked at the wrong hotel type of people, but at the end of this night, I got the drunks. We've had a ship crew staying with us since November. They're nice guys, they really are. They're leaving soon to take their ship elsewhere. The majority of them thought today was going to be their last day in the hotel, and a chunk of the crew decided to go out and have a few drinks to commemorate. They left at around 6:00 p.m. My shift ended at 11 o'clock, but I have a terrible habit of staying way after I clock out to talk with a night auditor. Now that terrible habit has come in handy for her, as she sometimes gets guests who come down to flirt with her. She's about 10 years younger than me, so her mean gene hasn't kicked in yet. So I act as a buffer for her from time to time. I was especially useful last night when our ship crew came back around midnight and they were absolutely hammered. The night auditor and I were at the desk when we saw them stumbling through the parking lot. There were 5 who went out. One was stone cold sober, and you could see the annoyance on his face as he walked ahead of everyone else. Another guy was incredibly drunk, actually could walk in a straight line, but that line was just perpendicular to where he needed to go. Then there was a guy who we will call Lumberjack, that's obviously not their real name, partly because he was dressed like one, and partly because it describes how he walked back into the hotel. It's like he was trying to remember how to use all his limbs all at once. Anyways, all the guys made it back into the hotel without falling or bumping into anything. No one was obnoxious. They just couldn't walk correctly. They all headed straight for their rooms, and I wished them a safe journey up the elevator and continue with my chat with the night auditor. 6 minutes later, we heard a loud beep from our stairwell intercom behind the front desk. It scared the ever-living heck out of us because no one ever uses it. Thankfully, I remembered how to operate it, so I went over to see who needed our assistance. I say into the speaker, "Hello?" and I was met with heavy breathing. This repeated several times before myself and the night auditor decided that we should go up and see who was there. We had a suspicion that it was one of the drunks who had just walked in, but we didn't know what state we'd find them in. We were so incredibly nervous, but we both agreed that we would be braver with each other. We walked cautiously up the stairs. The higher we got, the more we could hear labored breathing, as well as dry heaving. To avoid startling whoever was there, I let out a few timid hellos and still got no response. The distress call came from the 3rd floor stairwell. The night auditor and myself arrived to see no one was there, but the sounds of someone being sick were louder than ever. We soon looked up to see Lumberjack leaning over the wall of the 4th floor stairs, which is odd because his room is on the 3rd floor. The night auditor looks up and says, "Are you okay?" And the Lumberjack replies by saying, "Yes, ma'am," which really was his catchphrase of the night. Through some other intelligible grunts and drunken gestures, he assured us that he was okay and didn't need any assistance. So we retreated back to the front desk, but there was no way we were going to take his word for it though, so we planned to go back up after a few minutes. And so we did. We went back up the stairwell, only for me to then round the corner and stumble upon him slumped over on the 3rd floor stairs. I held my breath waiting for signs of life, and thankfully they came quickly with his signature heavy breathing. The night audit and myself took turns trying to wake him up. He flashed his bloodshot eyes at us and gave us a few more yes ma'ams before agreeing to let us help him into his room just down the hall. The image of us 2 shrimpy little women trying to hold up this tree of a man from pinballing down the hall was hilarious to watch on camera later on when it was all done and over with. And I'm just glad that it was the 2 of us there, because I don't think either one of us could have done this on our own. But we got it done. We got him into his room, then later we put together a hangover package of sorts just for him. He's been in his room all day. There was even a note about this whole incident on our communications board. Our general manager commended our quick thinking. The front office manager and I both did wellness checks on him. When I called him tonight during my shift, he said he has no memory of even coming back to the hotel and could only imagine what he had done while he was drunk. But I assured him that he was the most polite drunk I've ever come across. But hopefully in the future, he's a little bit more careful about how much he drinks. That way he can avoid this type of ordeal altogether. What a funny situation to be stuck in. I can't imagine having to look over and see these 2 women trying to escort this guy back into his hotel room. This seriously could have been a lot worse, and he could have been one of those grumpy, angry drunks who could have been very angry and very grumpy and possibly even violent. So with all things considered, I think the night auditor as well as the original poster absolutely got off easy. I said something awful to my fiancé in the heat of the moment, and I really feel horrible about it, and I seriously don't know what to do. My fiancé and I have been together for almost 5 years now, and our anniversary is coming up soon. We met in our last year of college and have been joined at the hip ever since. One of our first serious conversations when we started dating was about our thoughts on marriage, as well as kids, where we'd live, how our lives would fit around that, etc. To be fair, it was more so one of those honeymoon, head over heels, this is gonna be so exciting talks, but we never really meant it. We would periodically bring up different bits, saying stuff like, "I can't wait to be living in the countryside," or stuff like that, random bits as they came up over the course of our relationship. Our plans, albeit idealistic, seemed solid. Last night, after a bit of invitation writing together, we had some wine and had a long chat about what we are looking forward to the most in married life. She said that she can't wait to have a home that we own and not rent. The reason being is so that we can go off for months at a time and travel around Europe without having to worry about losing our place, as well as constantly moving. I made a joke about our kids' piecemeal education and how they'd surely have that from much of the chopping and changing of schools. She didn't really look at me or laugh when I said that. A few more glasses of wine later, we go to bed. bed. While cuddling to sleep, she whispered to me, "I don't think I want kids." And when she said that, I just kind of lost my mind. I didn't yell or scream, I just left. I got dressed and started to leave. She was calling after me, saying we can talk about this and to come back to bed. And I really regret it, but I called her a manipulator just like her mother. Now, I won't get into it here, it's just way too personal, but her mother is an awful, awful person. I really do want to blame the wine for what I said, but that's not fair. I slept on the couch and woke up feeling like garbage. I still do. My fiance won't talk to me. She's barely even looked at me. I know I heard her saying that, but I'm also hurt too. And I don't want to talk about this with anyone that we might know. Honestly, my brain is fried, and I think I'm trying to justify what I said. What should I do? I think the obvious first thing that you really need to do is just apologize. I think you need to go back to her and be like, "Look, I'm sorry for what I said. Obviously, you were shocked by her suddenly being like, hey, guess what? I don't want to have kids." And this is after having so many conversations about having kids. Like, the timing definitely did not seem right. And while yes, you were probably devastated by her saying that, it does not give you the right to then talk to her in that manner. I think that kind of personal attack is completely unwarranted and absolutely out of line. So hopefully you can come to some kind of agreement between the two of you and you're able to move forward with some kind of confidence in your relationship. Because otherwise, I can see you sleeping on the couch for a lot longer than just this night. My fiance's crazy ex-friend keeps begging us for money, as well as trying to break me and him up over the stupidest of reasons. And despite our attempts to get away from this crazy person, she keeps finding a way back into our lives. Here's what happened. So this entitled Karen and my fiance have had an odd past, even before I met him. In high school, he used to have a big crush on her, but she was not interested in him in that way. They did become good friends though, and dated other people. After graduation, he went on to a serious relationship, and so did she. She was dating another woman and asked him if he would be willing to donate to them so that they could have a baby, if you know what I mean. And surprisingly, he agreed, so long as they worked out a proper legal contract so that he wouldn't be legally or financially responsible for the child, which she agreed to arrange. Sometime later, my fiance and I started dating. He informs me of this agreement, asking what I think and if it would be an issue for us in the slightest. I say that I think he's being smart about it, and I respect that this was an agreement made to help a friend before I was in the picture, so I don't have any issue with it, and I am okay with it. Now, this appeared to be the case until it did appear that her relationship was failing. Yep, she was one of those surely a baby will fix it type of people. Both my fiance and I became more worried the more unhinged that her text became. Her relationship ended, but now she was insisting a baby would help her loneliness. While this was happening, my fiance and I were getting serious, and we were moving into an apartment together. One day while we were out near my parents' house, my fiance gets some alarming text messages from her. She tells us that she's in his dad's house, and his dad isn't even home. My fiance is texting her questions, and she's replying casually, as if she's doing a very normal thing. Apparently, she had let herself in with a spare key that he had given her years ago for emergencies. When asked what she was doing there, she claimed she was just spending time with his cat. Now, his cat isn't very social, and she was also taking pictures of my fiance's childhood pictures that were hanging on the walls, also that she could have an idea of what her future kids are gonna look like. Now, when we heard this, we were both incredibly disturbed, and I tell my fiance that I now have a stipulation to moving in together. I told him that this entitled Karen is not allowed to know our apartment address. Now, she's still baby crazy and starts demanding my fiance finally donates to her. Never mind the contract, she just needs this baby. My fiance gives her a hard no at this because not only is she clearly mentally unwell, but we know she doesn't have the financial resources for a kid, and I 100% back his choice. He tells her he can't do it and she can go elsewhere. For our time at the apartment, we lived in blissful silence from her insanity, but that came crashing down a month after we moved into a house. Apparently, she was in a relationship that whole blissful period because she just got broken up with. My fiance then asked me if she can come over because she was taking it really hard. I was incredibly hesitant, but kept thinking that we did now have a very large house, and it would be unfair to keep his friends away forever, especially if they are really good friends. He vouched for her that she seemed to be doing much better now. Plus, it had been like, 2 years now? So I agreed to give her a chance. I finally met the woman I demonized as some psycho obsessed with my fiance, and she seemed normal for the most part. I ended up spending more time with her than my fiance, since he's not great with emotional situations, and it felt like we became fast friends. She spent a few nights over while her ex was at their apartment, and we actually actually had a lot in common. Over several months, we became pretty close friends. We would confide life issues in each other. I believed her excuses for every red flag, showing that she's still unhinged. Towards the beginning, her ex still wanted to be friends, but wanted some space. The entitled Karen kept trying to ask for hugs or be clingy, pushing her ex's boundaries because she wasn't over her. Sometime later, the entitled Karen decided to try hooking up with a man and told me she thought she may be pregnant. I started asking what she was going to do, since she was struggling to pay for even herself, and if she even told this guy in the first place. She looked like the thought hadn't even crossed her mind and muttered something about how she didn't even think that he wanted a kid. When she told me this, I was shocked, and when I told her that she has to tell him if she got a positive test, she suddenly agreed, as if that was her plan all along. Luckily, in the end, she wasn't even pregnant, but after a few months of living in her apartment alone, she told me that she started hearing a voice that isn't hers. So I suggested that she should see a psychiatrist, since it could be a form of schizophrenia or something similar, which is entirely manageable with professional help. She acted like she was considering this advice, but nothing came of it, and she never mentioned it again. Now, did I mention that this chick was baby crazy? She truly cemented her dedication to her dream of becoming a single mother, not just by texting me every couple of weeks about her goal of doing so and of moving away, but also by showing me her baby stuff. Oh yeah, she was prepped for any day that she might have a baby. A 44-gallon long storage bin filled to the brim with baby clothes of variety sizes and genders, plus a regular 31-gallon storage bin, mostly full of baby toys, as well as books and shoes. Now, I don't personally have any close friends with kids, but I have never met anyone with this much baby stuff pre-child. Well, anyways, one summer day, I was having a rough time. I was recovering from an illness that took its toll on me, and we had a roommate at the time who was like having a child of our own. The entitled Karen offered to come over and clean and listen to me vent. She cleaned up the mess, I couldn't, and we ended up going on a drive to talk in private. I confided in her that my fiancé was back to having a huge problem giving people money again. He did this in the past, but stopped when I asked him to, because no one ever paid him back. He learned some of them lied and used the money for other nefarious things, and half the beggars weren't even his friends. Plus, this time, some of the amounts were in the hundreds of dollars. I was sobbing that we were months behind on rent when we really shouldn't be. She seemed sympathetic but annoyed at him. She then instantly suggested that I dump him, and I thought she was joking, but she was serious. I was genuinely baffled that she would suggest that I break up with him when our lives are so entangled together at this point that this was our first ever serious point of contention. She started trying to comfort me by saying that he's my best friend and that she loves him, but then in the same sentence, to then continue to trash talk him. I was getting annoyed because the things she was saying were just mean and two-faced. About a month or two after our serious talk, I'm checking my fiance's bank account to see if he has stayed true to his word. And this was nothing shady, by the way. He had given me permission to view his bank account whenever I wanted. And what do I see? Guess what? Hundreds of dollars sent to this entitled Karen. He sent $500, tons of small $10 to $20 amounts, $200, $300, just some nonsensical amounts. He says the $500 was because she said she was at risk of being evicted. I told him that we can't afford to pay for her rent when we're struggling to eat ourselves. He agrees to stop sending her money, but I'm mostly hurt that she would take advantage of both my fiance and me at this point. She knew he had a problem and that we were struggling financially too, and still took advantage of us. She knew that I was incredibly stressed out about our situation and didn't care in the slightest. One night, she keeps bugging my fiance for $10. He tells me he's just going to send it to her to shut her up. And when he said this, I said, okay, but I'm going to call her out for it. I tell her then to stop begging my fiance for money, and she replies by saying, well, I don't appreciate you calling me begging. I get paid Friday, and I'm going to pay it back. I don't like owing people money. It's who I am. Now, I know she isn't going to, so I back down and we play friendly again. She makes an odd jab at me when I say that I'm just making sure that she's not taking advantage of my fiance like other users in his life, because she says that she's been around the longest, longer than any of his girlfriends, which I just ignore because I don't feel threatened by her in the slightest. By Friday, I keep reminding my fiance to bug her about the $10, since she made a point of telling me that she doesn't like owing people money. Well, apparently she didn't like that either, because she would just ignore those messages. Come Sunday, she's talking about making a will, and this is presumably due to her fainting spells that she claimed to be experiencing something at the time. We don't know if these were real, but this was the day before her doctor's appointment, which she had claimed before that she hoped that they would tell her that she's gonna be passing away or something like that. Yeah, really crazy stuff. We were both done with her dramatic garbage at this point, and after reading her text out loud, I jokingly said, "So about that $10, and we both just cracked up. He then actually sends her a text message asking her about the will while also asking her about the $10, and thankfully she just left him on red and didn't even answer. 2 days after my fiance and I were talking about how we couldn't believe she still hasn't replied or literally said anything, my fiance checks other social media and discovers that she has unfriended him on Snapchat and Facebook. I check and she did the same to me. Now I'm annoyed, but I'm not too surprised at this point because crazy's gonna be crazy. But when I look over at my fiance, he is genuinely hurt by this. He doesn't say it, but I can tell she helped reaffirm his fear that his friends only like him for his money. He does say that she was one of the longest friends that he's ever had, and he can't believe that she would do that over $10. And at this point, I'm red with rage. My fiance goes to sleep sad, and I realize I can still message her on Facebook, even though we're not friends. I decide to play dumb and ask if we did something. She claims that she's taking a break from social media, but this was obviously a lie, because for one, she was sending me TikToks just the day before, and as a second thought, I saw that she had a mutual friend still added on social media, and also literally who takes a break by unfriending their friends. And even literally like the next day after this conversation, she updated her cover photo and her profile picture. I point out the fact that we still have a mutual friend, and she claims that she's going from the top down to the bottom. I straight up just say to her that it seemed like after my fiance asked about the $10, all of this started to happen. She says no, she's just been super busy with work, and she's planning to move. So after that, I just stop replying. The next day, I catch our roommate up with the drama because I am still seething with rage. He goes on to ask her what her name is, and I tell him. He pulls up her Facebook and starts messaging her. He says to her, "Hey, you got that $10? And she replies by saying, "Who in the world is this?" He then sends her a message by saying, "I thought you were taking a break from social media." And this entitled Karen sent a message by saying, "I keep my messenger open for friends and family." And then she blocked him. We both laughed at how dumb it was, hoping it wouldn't cause my fiance too much trouble. He enters the kitchen, and my roommate goes to him and says, "Listen, I did message your former friend." And my fiance just goes, "Oh, I know. I've been hearing about it. She sent me screenshots." We all bust up laughing about it. And then this entitled Karen gets to me. She sends me a screenshot of her sending my fiance $9 and says to me, "I also don't appreciate being bugged by your roommate, seeing as I have to explain to your fiance why it took me a moment to pay him back." And that's when I decided that the kids' gloves were off. I took my time and I sent back this absolute banger of a message. I said to her, "I didn't ask him to. I was just talking to him and he did it on his own. And it also took that to get you to explain anything. So don't make it sound like you explained it to my fiance first and then my roommate messaged you. It's kind of messed up that you ignored my fiance and me every time we mentioned the $10 that you owe him. Like the fact that you made a whole deal out of telling me that you get paid on Friday and that you were going to give it back to him, and how you don't like owing people because it's just who you are, to then you making me seem like a massive jerk for calling you out, all because you're asking my fiance for more handouts. And even still, you just ignore every reminder, so you don't even have a good enough excuse. Like if you didn't get paid, you could have said so and not been like, "Oh, I can't read suddenly." And after I sent that text message to her, she didn't reply. I waited for a few hours with a typed list of things I wanted to say before likely being blocked, and then sent it. Essentially, it was a long multi-paragraph wall of text in which I told her that we knew she unfriended us over this, as well as how much it hurt my fiance, and how we have both noticed her manipulative tendencies now, how it's not about the money itself, because if it was, we would be hounding her about the $500. Basically explaining that money isn't the real issue, but in fact, it's because she kept asking my fiance for money, knowing he has a problem with saying no. We simply can't afford to fund whatever she's doing, and it's putting stress on our relationship. And I specifically mentioned how she borrowed $500 from us after I had literally sobbed in her car about how bad our finances were, and she still took advantage of my fiance. I may have gone a little petty after this and mentioned it being a reoccurring trend that she goes crazy after a breakup, while also explaining why she never got to see our apartment. I directly called her out for entering my fiance's dad's house without anyone's permission. I called her a mooch, and I told her that she needs mental help. And wouldn't you believe it, she just left me on red. Not gonna lie, part of me kind of hoped that she would at least try to argue. I didn't want to believe someone would actually be so cruel to others and hang them out to dry. But despite everything I said to her, she went on to text my fiancé as if nothing had happened. She vaguely stated that she wasn't comfortable coming over anymore, but wouldn't say why when she was asked. About a week later, she tried asking for $150 again, but obviously my fiancé wasn't having it. He played oblivious just like I used to when she tried dialing up the self-pity. I asked him to block her after this and he did. Another 2 weeks went by and she texted him from a new number playing the same old game. This time she tried laying it on hard by claiming that she was super depressed over her financial struggles. My fiancé just replied by agreeing, since we've also had bad financial struggles and his anxiety has been awful, while also struggling with intrusive thoughts as well, if you know what I mean. Now, I guess that wasn't the answer that she wanted from her best friend, because she switched topics almost immediately. She started saying that he should really break up with me because we're just not a good match. And that's when he blocked her again. When my fiancé told me this, I just burst out laughing. I knew she was trying to break us up, and I finally had my confirmation. I just never imagined it would be such a sad attempt. Oh, and by the way, I added up how much she borrowed just in 2022, and it totaled up to $1,670. But with all things considered, my fiancé and I are so relieved that this entitled Karen is officially out of our lives. What a crazy turn of events. I mean, seriously, let's think about this for a second. This entitled Karen not only wanted her fiancé to donate to her, if you know what I mean, also she could have a baby to cure her loneliness. Well, I've got news for you. A baby is literally the last thing you want if you're looking for any kind of solution in your life. Having a baby is a serious decision, and that is something you definitely don't want to take lightly. But it obviously seems like this entitled Karen was taking it lightly. And I'm personally blown away that the original poster even let this crazy lady back in her life in the first place. I mean, this entitled Karen has proven that she is not a good person, and she only wanted to be around to try and ruin your relationship while also begging your fiancé for money. And sure, after a while of dealing with this stuff, this all would obviously become a game to you all, which did kind of lead to you trolling her with your roommate, as well as you talking to her about the $10. But in my honest opinion, I really think you should have just cut her off right from the get-go. She should have never been allowed in your house in the first place, and I think the original poster was completely misguided, as well as incredibly foolish for confiding in this lady who not even 2 years ago was begging for your fiancé to basically give her a child. Like, what on earth were you thinking? That's not someone you want to confide in. So hopefully the original poster and the fiancé learned a valuable lesson, and hopefully in the future, this entitled Karen plays no role in their life ever again. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. An entitled customer freaks out when he realizes he has to pay for his drinks after being told by the organizer of the event that he didn't have to pay for a dime. And I unfortunately got caught in the crossfire, and I've never been more annoyed in my life. Here's what happened. So I had my restaurant booked out for a private event for about 150 people yesterday, and this was for a big sports event. This doesn't happen super often, and it's only the second private event I've worked, the first time being an absolute disaster, during which every member of staff cried at least once. Needless to say, we were hoping this time went a lot smoother. Now, we were just working on the info the organizers gave us, which we were led to believe had been communicated to the guests as well. Basically, if the guests had a pink lanyard, they were paying for drinks as they went. A gray lanyard, on the other hand, meant that they had a prepaid package and got free refills on beers, wines, and soft drinks. What's important to note is that they did not get spirits included. The event actually goes super smooth. We get their 2 courses out really quickly. Drinks are flying out the bar at a rapid pace, and we as a restaurant actually all smashed it, to be completely honest. The organizers told us to stop serving drinks at about 1 o'clock, get their checks paid off, and get everyone ready to depart on their coaches to the game. And this is where things started getting interesting. 3 of my 5 tables asked to talk to a manager when I told them the bar was closed. And it makes me question why they thought that she'd be able to do anything about it when we were just working on what the organizers told us. So honestly, I just don't know what they were thinking. Then one of my tables with gray lanyards got confused when I brought over the bill. One guy asked me, "What in the world is that?" To which I told him it was the bill, and the refills of beer they had were included in their package, so it was just the several double vodkas they had to pay for. He then asked me, "Since when do I have to pay for that?" And I obviously told him that was the plan from the start because, well, it was. Well, he was not pleased to say the least. he started yelling at me about how he'd ordered the premium package and wasn't supposed to have to pay, and about how this was an absolute disgrace and that he wanted me to get my manager right now and all this other stuff. After a few minutes of this and me gently explaining that we were working on the information provided by their organizers, he demanded I go get someone who is in charge. I was already sick of him and I knew my manager wouldn't be able to do anything, so I just went straight to the top. I got the main organizer and I asked him what was going on. He went to speak to them, then spoke to my manager, and I have no idea what happened or what was said. But somehow, the guy ended up not having to pay for the spirits, and they were put on the organizer's tab instead. I do understand the guy's perspective though, especially if he thought he was getting everything included, and then that didn't happen. Honestly, if that happened to me, I would be upset as well. But bro, I am not the person to be yelling at, and in my opinion, it's a lack of organization as well as clarity on the organizer's part, not ours. Other than that, everything went well for the most part. I actually got some decent tips, and we were told we had all done really well. But still, despite that one guy who freaked out on me certainly put a damper on my evening. Honestly, if I was that guy, I might have gotten upset as well. If I paid for what I thought was a premium package, and I was told, hey, I'm gonna get everything basically no matter what, and I wouldn't have to pay at the event as I already did pay, I'd be furious if that wasn't the case suddenly. And yeah, he could have handled that in a much better way, and while he definitely shouldn't have taken that out on the waiter, I do kind of understand where he's coming from. If anything, he should be angry at that organizer, because clearly they gave some misinformation here, and they basically lied to their customers, as well as the people that were going to the event. I mean, to go to an event with the expectation that your drinks would basically be taken care of if you bought into this premium package, and then all of a sudden the premium package only covers some of it, and you weren't informed of that, would be a major slap in the face. So honestly, the organizer is absolutely all to blame. They did not do this properly, and they did this in a shady way. So hopefully the next time they organize an event, they're able to have their ducks more in a row, because the way the people around them got treated was absolutely disrespectful, and all the anger and fury should not have gone towards the waiter, but rather towards the organizer themselves. My entitled Karen of a mother throws a temper tantrum, claiming discrimination against this security guard, all because they were asking for her receipt as she was walking out the door, and I've honestly never been more embarrassed about anything in my life. So I first want to start off by saying that my mother is well known to be a Karen, even going as far as joking about it herself sometimes. She is usually really sweet, but when it comes to staff or workers, her entitled Karen side comes out full force, and I have several stories in my past about her antics. So me and my partner are moving out of our house to a new town. So last week, I moved back home with my parents for a few days to clean out my old storage room, while my partner went down to the new town for his first day of school. My dad had a seizure the first day I moved home, so my mom asked me to help her with some general shopping, while my grandmother watched my 4 siblings and took care of my dad. I drove us around town to a few stores, eventually ending up at Kmart. She wanted to get some workout gear, so we go in, we do our shopping, and we head to the checkouts. And here is where things started to really go wrong. She grabbed the receipt and grabbed the items, getting ready to walk out of the store. And there has been a lot of thefts recently, due to the economic climate of my country at the moment. So security will quickly glance at your receipt, see the number of items you have, and let you out. Usually they don't do this to everyone, just the occasional shady person, which has gotten the company in hot water because of accusations of discrimination. So the company now makes it an effort to check all receipts, which I'm honestly fine with. As we walk out, my mother makes it past the security scanners before the young lady working as security guard asks for the receipt. And this turns out to be a massive mistake. My entitled mother immediately screws her face up and makes a loud scoffing sound before exclaiming loudly, "Excuse me, do I look like someone who would shoplift?" At this point, everyone at the cash registers is now looking over at us, and I feel like melting into a puddle just to get away, as I have such bad social anxiety. The poor lady puts her hands up in a defensive way and politely explains that we need to check everyone's receipts so we aren't discriminating against anybody. Well, my entitled Karen of a mother puffs up, screws up her face even more, and looks at her again and says, "But do I look like I shoplift? All my clothes are labeled, all expensive brands." She then scoffs again, winding up for another tirade, waving around the little paper that would have just saved me from embarrassment, all while flapping her lips like a shocked fish. She is slowly turning a lovely shade of tomato red and looks like she's going to burst. Realizing things are going to get much worse, I finally pick myself out of my mental puddle, grab the receipt from her claws, and show the security guard, who is still trying to placate the raging entitled Karen. I hand it over politely, saying, "Here, have a look, is this okay? All while gazing longingly at those sliding doors, as I know salvation from the dirty looks hitting the back of my head is only a few steps away. The poor security guard waves me through, and I grab my entitled mother's shoulder to push her out the door, and she thankfully lets me, moving through and muttering about rights and managers, and how this lady was not doing her job properly, all while stamping her feet like a toddler. I look over my shoulder as we walk out and give the security lady, who looked like she had just been slapped, a compassionate little smile, and I mouthed an apology. The last words I hear before the doors of salvation slid shut was the security guard commenting in a small voice, "I only needed to see the receipt, it's my job." And I honestly felt horrified when I heard that. Relief flooded me as I realized that it was all over, embarrassment burning at my cheeks as I shepherded my entitled mother into the car. All the while she's still going on and on about how outrageous this was, and how she feels disgusting, all because she was asked to show her receipt. Now thinking that this was over, I hopped in the front seat, with my hands shaking and my eyes tearing up. But no, it was not over. My entitled mother then turns to me, scrunched up her face, and made one last remark. She said to me, "This only happens because you look homeless. Next time, wear a dress." So now I don't think I want to take my mom shopping or go to Kmart ever again. Yeah, your mom was completely out of line there. Especially with the surge of self-checkout machines, it's kind of obvious that nowadays if you want to go grocery shopping, people are gonna be all over you to make sure you don't steal anything. Because unfortunately, that's kind of the world we live in. So the way your entitled mother acted towards this security guard was completely inappropriate. It was super messed up and it was not okay. And that last comment about you looking homeless and that you should wear a dress next time was completely inappropriate. There was no reason to talk like that. Literally, that has nothing to do with anything in this situation. Because in reality, next time just show your receipt. It takes like what, 2 seconds? They're gonna look at it and say, okay, it looks like you bought everything, and then they're gonna send you on your way. Trust me, it gets on my nerves as well when I go shopping, but as of right now, it just kind of seems like that's how things are nowadays. So hopefully if you do go out with your mom again, hopefully she doesn't act like this, because I would be mortified if that happened to me in public, and I seriously probably would never want to go anywhere with her ever again. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. An entitled Karen has worked their way back into our lives after my husband and I blocked them out of our life and told them straight up that we don't want to talk to them anymore. Here's what happened. So this story is an update to a previous story we covered on the channel, where the original poster and their fiancé had to deal with an entitled Karen of a friend who was constantly begging for money, as well as begging their fiancé to donate to them so they could finally have a kid. Here's what they had to say in regards to their update. So to clarify a couple of questions people have from my previous post, I am and was very aware that the entitled Karen wasn't a friend of my husband. I used the term in quotes, saying that they were best friends, and it was because she would refer to themselves as just that. After all, it is hard to convey sarcasm and tone, especially on the internet. Also, we struggle financially in the food insecure kind of way. That is to say that we were never at risk of going homeless, but there were times when the missing money would lead to grocery trips not being able to be made. Now, the biggest update of them all is that we've gotten married, so I can now refer to my fiancé as my husband, even though we're still only engaged at the time of the events in this post. To anyone wondering why we would get married not long after such an incident, we had to push the wedding date up because I lost health insurance, which I desperately need since I'm disabled. So as some of you probably know from my last post, the entitled Karen wasn't done with my husband. I have to admit, I was bothered by some of the comments telling me to rethink if he was really done with her. It turns out you were all right. He casually mentioned to me that she texted him asking for money again, and he was trying to get the $500 back, and that was the amount that he explicitly said was a loan for her not to get evicted, even though that story was basically a lie. Now, when I heard this, I was shocked, because we just had a serious talk, and he said he blocked her and was done with her not that long ago. Now, he mentioned that he used to loan people money in high school and be really annoyed to not get any money back. I was wary, because this isn't high school anymore. People don't have to see you every day. I gave in because I felt too depressed at the moment to argue. I said that I'd look forward to seeing his new tactic before he went to sleep. Part of me thought I was being unfair by not giving him the chance to handle the situation the way he wanted, but this really upset me, and as crazy as she was, I still did not want to make my fiancé feel like he had to choose between me or her. I didn't want to give him some kind of ultimatum. That whole week or two, I kept wanting to look through his phone, which is something I've never wanted to do in a relationship. I finally realized it was because he lied to me about no longer contacting her. So I started to wonder what else he lied to me about. So I nervously checked his bank account. No money money was sent to this crazy entitled Karen, but he sent $40 to another friend on Thanksgiving, as well as $140 to yet another friend just the day before. At this point, I was just bawling my eyes out, thinking he'd keep doing this and making excuses, so then I would have to leave him. I could not stand by while he tried to play the hero to people who could literally care less about him. After I realized the issue, we talked and I did feel a bit better afterwards. I was honest about him talking to this entitled Karen and how it still bugged me deeply. He said he felt determined to get the $500 back and thought he could do it himself. I was dumbfounded and asked why he thought this would be any different than before. He said that she said she'd be able to start paying him back in July. And you know what? It is currently November. When he mentioned it last, he told me it was January. And I know he gets those months mixed up, but like, come on. I asked him if he really plans to play nice with her for over half a year, and he was baffled, confirming that he did mix up his months. I had to bite my tongue and stop myself from being too blunt at this point. I could tell that he already felt really dumb. I pointed out that he may think he has some kind of control in the situation, but he never did. It's always been her terms and always will be when trying to engage with her level of crazy. Even if he never sends her another cent, she'll never send him another either. She only did last time when our roommate got involved because she didn't respect my husband. At the end of it, I told him that he needs to go no contact with this entitled Karen and not just block her like he said he did last time, but actually write a message to her saying that he'll no longer be talking to her anymore. He didn't have to be mean since he's not confrontational like that. Just convey the points clearly. He agreed and started saying that he just needs a couple of days to figure out what to say. I felt like this was good progress and I would check back soon. And he even got the $140 from the other user as well. Though this only happened because I ratted that friend out to our roommate, who is her ex, who was still convinced that she could patch things up with. The roommate was angry that she did this and told me exactly how she felt about my husband. And I told my fiance all of this. I felt guilty because we had just discussed the issue of him feeling like he doesn't have any friends. And I wasn't trying to be vindictive or hurt him. I just wanted him to finally open his eyes and realize how disgusting some of the people he kept in his life really were. And well, it honestly worked. We had another talk, but this time there weren't any excuses. My husband at least took this news as the kick in his pants to send the message to this entitled Karen. He essentially wrote that he's realized that some of the things she's been doing have been very manipulative and how she only hits him up to ask for money and rides. So he's ending the friendship and he won't be talking to her anymore. And she just responds by saying, okay. And as much as it made him see red as well, he simply put his phone down. I was yelling obscenities about her and was amazed at his ability to disengage. He said she probably just wanted a reaction, so he wasn't going to give it to her. But we both agreed though that he should wait to block her because we started to bet on how long it would take before she starts asking for money again. He said a few months and I laughed and said a few weeks tops. A few days later, my husband and I are spending time together. He then gets a text message from an acquaintance, and this is a genuine one. Thankfully, he does have a few of those. She's asking about a car part price. I already forgot what it was, but essentially, she went to get her oil changed, and the shop was checking things over and was like, oh man, this thing's busted. It's gonna cost $4,000. So he asked me if that sounded too high and relayed the story. Even I was like, yeah, I think the high end is supposed to be like, what, $1,200? But that straight up sounds like a scam. So he recommended her to his shop that he trusts and is way cheaper. She went there and got the part installed for only $800 and thanked him a bunch. So why is this relevant? Well, the next day, and I'm talking 3 days after he sent this entitled Karen the message, she ends up texting him again. She has the same story as his acquaintance. However, she's telling my husband that she needs $4,000 to fix her car. My husband just texts her back, telling her to go to the same shop he recommended to the other friend. She insists that no, she knows her car, and knows she needs this part from this shop. He finally snaps and sends back a message, basically saying, okay, good luck, have fun begging online for that kind of money. And then he blocks her. Now it has been quite the peaceful few weeks. My husband and I felt closer again after we were more honest with each other. But this only lasted a few weeks though, because God forbid, we forgot about this entitled Karen's entitlement. One of her friends reached out to my fiance. This entitled Karen apparently wanted his computer. When we were all friends, he said she could have it when he got a new one. Obviously, that offer is no longer standing, and even if it were, it isn't even valid because he doesn't have a new one. She wanted the PC he was currently gaming on. Not that she would know that he still uses the same one anyways, but still, the audacity of this lady is insane. I feel like the beginning of karma may be in the works. She's still makes new numbers to try and reach out to my husband, and he blocks her. But she did share that she got back with her ex, the same one who dumped her on Halloween, and made me pity her enough to give her a second chance in our lives in the first place. So I'm sure it's a matter of time until they break up again. Hopefully when that happens, her partner takes the dog, because dear Lord, her most despicable crime is pet neglect. Her dog has so many behavioral issues, he would go to the bathroom on the carpet and even jumped out of a moving car twice. Anytime she would mention this to me, I tried to mention that those were the signs of a dog not getting enough attention, but she just didn't understand. She thought that because she would take him on a short walk once or twice a day, that should be enough. She seemed unable to comprehend that dogs aren't like cats, and they require a lot more stimulation, time, and energy. In the meantime, we're just waiting until she texts us again. And this is also we can try out my newest idea. We would pretend like we don't know her and act like this is the wrong number. I even told my husband, what she's gonna do is she's gonna call and check to hear your voice, but then you can just keep gaslighting her in the text messages. So this year, we're manipulating the manipulators. We're still being cautious since we don't know her motives and don't want to provoke an explosion once it actually dawns on her that my husband is done with her. I think since she knows that she's no longer getting anything from him, that probably won't happen. But based on her past unhinged behavior, I know not to rule anything out. This entitled Karen is crazy. I mean, seriously, talk about not getting the message. You've been blocked multiple times. You've been shut down every time you've tried to get money out of them. You've sent your friends to try and get their computer as well as $4,000 for a car part. I mean, this is clearly insane at this point. I think the only honest solution is to then just change your number, because this lady seriously sounds crazy. But hopefully for the sake of all of this lady does in fact stay blocked and your husband and you don't have to deal with her ever again. Today I messed up by trying to be a gentleman and helping out a woman in need, but as a result I got labeled a creep and was accused of doing something absolutely horrible. Here's what happened. So this situation happened the other night. I had received an invite from some friends to go out to a bar that is local to me. It's just a few blocks away, and I decided it would be best to just walk there. I am the only one in our friend group that lives within 15 minutes of a drive at the shortest. I was the last person to arrive, and the group was 6 people in total. 2 were a couple, and the other was a woman by the name of Val, that's not her real name, and I had known about her from the conversations with my friends. And it was right about then that I quickly realized that this was set up. The night went well, and we were drinking and having a good time when the couples decided to go home. By this time, Val and I were rather drunk. She was about to drive home when I told her she was way too under the influence to drive. She tried to argue with me, but I eventually won the argument. I told her I just live around the corner, and she was welcome to stay the night. There is no taxi service around us, so this really was our only option. She was hesitant, but agreed. On the walk back, it became pretty clear that she was way drunker than I had previously thought. It took us 30 minutes to walk 2 blocks. I ended up having to support her, and at one point even carry her to my apartment. I also realized how bad this looked, and hoped that no one would call the police or anything like that. We made it to my apartment, and she immediately took her shoes off and dropped her purse. I did a quick tour by standing in one spot and pointing out everything since it is a studio apartment. She saw my bed and jumped on it and proceeded to pass out. I was not nearly as drunk as she was, and I was trying to be respectful and responsible, so I grabbed an extra blanket and I put it on her for warmth as well as modesty, as she was wearing a dress. I grabbed a trash can, some water, and some hangover medication, and I put them all next to her. I remember her phone and purse, so I grabbed her purse and phone and decided to charge her phone, and I set it all next to where she was as well. I then prepared for bed myself and got the couch ready to sleep on, and I ended up passing out as well. I woke up and I heard the phone ringing. It was Val's. By the time I got up, it stopped ringing. Val had moved a little bit and somehow had taken off her dress, even though she still was under the blanket. I decided to get some coffee going and wake her up. I have never seen someone go from peaceful to confused to angry and then horrified and sick in such a short time in my life. When I woke her up, she threw up all over me, thankfully not getting any of it on the bed. She grabbed her phone with the charger still connected, wrapped herself up in the blanket, and locked herself in the bathroom. I set about cleaning up, and I could hear her talking quickly to someone. I took the water, the medication, and her purse, and I put them on the kitchen counter. She was crying and kept getting sick. She would not answer me when I asked if she was okay or needed anything. Now, at this point, I am now shirtless because I just took off all my clothes to clean and change. About 10 minutes after she ran to the bathroom, I heard a pounding on my door and yelling. It was one of our friends from the night before, and I honestly have no idea how she got to my place so fast. She was screaming through the door, calling me a disgusting pig, as well as so many other names. Now, I was confused. As I opened up the door, she pushed past me and went into the bathroom with Val. I stood there shocked. I put on a clean shirt and I ended up just staying in my kitchen. I made 3 cups of coffee and I just waited. 30 minutes later, they eventually came out. Val had on some spare clothes I had in the bathroom. I presented the coffee, water, and the meds to them. They were immediately defensive and aggressive. They demanded to know what happened the previous night, and so I went on to explain exactly what happened from when the friend left the bar. I also explained how Val was trying to drive home drunk, and I convinced her to not do that. I explained the long walk back to my place, the events of her passing out on my bed, as well as the blanket that I put over her. I pointed to the almost perfectly made bed, the trash can, and the charger halfway between the bed and the bathroom, as well as the water and the meds, and the obviously slept on couch. They then demanded to know where her dress was, and why I was no longer wearing a shirt when I answered the door. I calmly walked over to the bed, and I picked it up from the foot of the bed. I then reminded Val that she had just thrown up all over me. It took them a while, but I had to tell them that all I did was take care of a friend in need. Nothing happened, and I would never do anything unless it was consented to a sober-minded individual. I also explained how I had been on the other side of this, and it was not pleasant. They got less aggressive and were able to see I was telling the truth. Val apologized and said that she didn't remember the end of the night. She woke up in a strange place, basically undressed, hungover with a strange person waking her up. My friend's girlfriend apologized and explained her side. She tried to call, and when Val didn't answer, she got worried because she didn't hear from her for the rest of the night or that morning. Then she got a frantic call from Val minutes later saying that she was in my apartment, undressed, scared, and very sick. She drove over, banged on the door, and when I answered with my shirt off, she feared the worst. She apologized again, took her coffee, and left. Val apologized for the freakout. I said that I have been there and I wouldn't hold it against her. We talked for a bit, but she got her things together. I walked her to her car, and that was over at the bar, and she ended up leaving after that. I received a message from her this morning, since she had gotten my number from our friend, and she asked if we could hang out or something. She wanted to make it up to me for what she did the other night, as well as for taking care of her and not being a creep. And as of right now, I am going to be seeing her in a couple days. So with all things considered, I really hope it doesn't go poorly. What a crazy situation. Here you are just trying to help out someone you just met who was clearly trying to drive home drunk and give her a place to stay. There was obviously nothing sketchy going on, and you were literally just trying to be a nice person and help somebody out. But in the end, they freak out and start to accuse you of stuff that never happened. I can't imagine being in that situation. But hopefully your new date with this girl goes well. I mean, I'm amazed that Val even had the courage to reach out in the first place, because I know for a fact if that happened to me and I was in her shoes, I would never want to be in the same room as that person who took care of me ever again. I would personally be way too embarrassed to get anything going. So with all things considered, hopefully it all goes well and you're able to find some kind of common ground with this lady who did previously freak out on you. An entitled Karen blocks my driveway with her SUV, as she assumed that she could just park it there whenever she wanted to go pick up her kid from her school. But I was feeling petty and I got angry, so I blocked her car in with another one of my cars and I refused to move. Here's what happened. So I own a house a couple houses down from a school, so this was bound to happen eventually. When it's time for the kids to go home, my street is lined bumper to bumper with parents to pick up their kids. The sidewalks are full of families who walk all the way to their cars, and I often have to pick up balloons, snack packaging, old homework worksheets, and general garbage that the kids drop. If you're trying to get home around the time school lets out, there's no way you're going to be able to get out of there before the blockade the parents make is gone. Now, this has been a problem for the few years that we have lived here. There's two places that the kids let out. My street, which is a small cul-de-sac with the school at the top, and a main road that's open all the way down to the baseball park, with a wider road to allow street parking and two-way driving. Obviously, if you can't find parking, then the tiny residential road is not the way to go. There are 3 cars at my home: my car, my roommate's car, and my husband's utility van, which he parks on the road to avoid blocking our roommate since she's frequently in and out. So today is Friday, and I work from home. So when I finish work, I poke my head out the window to look at my fruit tree that I have near my driveway. It is spring, and I keep excitedly looking for blooms, and that's when I notice a big white Buick SUV in the middle of my driveway, blocking both spots from my car, which my husband was using since I was home, and my roommate's spot. Honestly, why would you park in somebody's driveway? So on top of these entitled parents blocking up our small residential road, this person decided to take up a private residence's driveway. So I got on the phone with a non-emergency police line sign and took pictures of the vehicle and the plate. Then I got my husband's keys and backed his vehicle up to block the SUV into my driveway, and I just waited. 15 minutes later, an entitled mom with bug-eye sunglasses, big old diamonds on her jewelry, and wearing yoga pants and athletic wear comes around to hop in the driver's seat and smiles and waves at me sitting on my steps. Honestly, she probably thought I was the homeowner's kid or something, all because I'm in my early 20s, but in reality, I'm the homeowner. The entitled Karen looks at me and says, "Hi, hope you don't mind." So I look at her and I say, "Ma'am, you're trespassing. Why would you park in a private driveway?" But the entitled Karen just looks at me and gives a scoff. "Sorry, won't do it again. We were just leaving." She was being really dismissive and avoiding eye contact despite taking the sunglasses off. So I looked at her and I said, "I don't care. You have no right to park on my property, and right now I'm on the phone with the police." The entitled Karen then looks at me and says, "It was just for a second. I was just picking up my daughter." But I look at her and I say, "It doesn't matter. You don't live here, so you don't park here." At this point, I realize the non-emergency police aren't going to pick up, so I hang up and decide to mess with her a bit. She got in her SUV and dismissively waved at me, so I got in my vehicle that was blocking her in and waited, pretending to still be on the phone. She starts trying to back out of my driveway because there was a little bit of a gap between my utility van and my neighbor's car, but it was definitely too small for this Buick. I would like to point out that this vehicle has a scuffed front on the bumper, so I had a feeling she has no spatial awareness outside of her backup camera. Every time she backed up, I honked, still pretending to be on the phone. She tried again and I honked again. She looked at my grass and I was about to start recording her in case she tried to go through my front yard. I honked again after I saw that. If she kept trying to back out and hit my big utility van, she would certainly lose. She gets out of her SUV and comes up to my van, recognizing that she can't do anything without making it far worse for herself. Her face was visibly patchy from the distress, and she asked me again, "Are you really calling the police?" I looked at her and I said, "Yes, you're illegally parked on my private property, and that's illegal. I don't care if it's for 5 seconds, don't ever do it. You don't live here." Her kid got out of the car, and I decided that was enough. So I waited for her to get back in her SUV, and I parked my van back in its rightful spot, and I let her out of my driveway. After that, I called the school, and I gave them the license plate number of this entitled Karen. Nothing will probably come of it, but I don't think she'll ever park in someone's driveway again anytime soon. And sure, I'll take the jerk points, because there was a child involved, but you shouldn't put your child in this kind of situation in the first place. What a weird entitled Karen. Seriously, you don't park in other people's driveways. Like, that is literally a one-stop shop to get your car towed away. It is simply not worth it, and it just shows your entitlement when you do that. I know if I was in the original poster's shoes, I absolutely would have called a tow truck. I mean, this person is parked on your property illegally, and you did not request or allow them to park their car there, so you very easily could have towed it. But good for you for at least putting this entitled Karen in her place, because I can bet after that ordeal, she probably will never park her car in anybody's driveway ever again. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. My entitled supervisor demands that I only do what's on my job title, and as a result, I'm unable to fix the payroll system, so nobody gets paid for several weeks. Here's what happens. So I work for a construction company as an inventory admin. My job is basically to schedule counts of our warehouse and input the numbers they give me for inventory. I then try to see what the problem is when the numbers on the last count and current count don't add up. There is a little bit more to it, but that's basically what I do. Now, the problem with this job is that when you have been doing it long enough and you are really good at it, there is less work to do all around. In the beginning, when counting one rack out of the 60 racks of material would take a few days, it was fine because I was always busy. But now that everything is in order, the entire warehouse can be counted in like 3 days. And unfortunately, this leaves me bored for most of the time. So to fix this, I studied up on our cloud-based ERP service that we use for all our internal and external transactions, and have become sort of an expert at it. Every single aspect of this company uses this ERP service to do their job. From timesheets to HR, payroll, accounting, scheduling, management, manufacturing, ordering from vendors, delivering, inventory, and then some. All of it runs through this service. So it is very important that this service is up and running 24/7. I became so proficient to this service that our vice president decided to cut ties with our consultants of the ERP because I could do what they did, but better, quicker, and much cheaper. For reference, we were paying these consultants $5,000 a month just to be on standby if we needed them for some sort of trouble that could arise just from using the ERP, and we had to dish out even more money to fix those problems, depending on how many hours was spent of their time just trying to fix said problem. I'm not sure on their exact rate, but it was something like $200 an hour, and they took weeks to fix anything, while I could fix the problem in time for my daily afternoon break. I never got an official job title or raise of any kind for being an expert on this service. The company just saw me being able to do it and let me fix things that happened, so they no longer needed the outside help. I wasn't too upset because it gave me something to do, so I was glad to help the company save some money, even if none of that money fell my way. Skip ahead a few months, and we now have a new warehouse manager, and someone in the warehouse messes up something with the inventory by sending a bunch of materials in the wrong job with no records of it ever being shipped. And we're talking like this is a $500,000 mess up here. This is a serious problem. In the same day, our ERP had an update that caused a bunch of bugs with our accounting department. So I decided to work on the ERP problem first because the warehouse mess up is more of a delay mess up and not actually stopping anybody from doing their job at the moment, while this accounting problem means our bills are not going to be able to be paid. I mean, you can only imagine what kind of issues we will run into if the bills are not being paid. The ERP bugs turn out to be quite big, as well as numerous, so it ends up taking me a couple of days to figure it out, but I fixed it before any bills are actually due and decided to take lunch a little early to celebrate a victory. There was thankfully a crisis averted. The new warehouse manager storms into my office after I get back from lunch, and he is livid. Apparently, the bosses were pinning the blame on him for the warehouse mess up, and considering he is the one who oversees shipments and the personnel in the warehouse, the blame is rightfully placed. He starts laying into me, asking why I have not fixed the problem yet, yelling and screaming like a child. I tried explaining that I was fixing an ERP issue and have not had time to look at the warehouse problem yet. He gets even more angry and notes that it is funny how I have more time to take early lunches, but not enough time to do my job. That started to really upset me, but I held my tongue and kept calm about the situation. He then ordered me to only do what is in my job title and to leave the ERP garbage to people competent enough to handle it, as he put it. Since this guy was technically my supervisor, I had no choice but to obey. I asked him to send me that in writing, and he snarks and storms back into his office. 5 minutes later, I get an email stating that under no circumstances am I to work on anything related to ERP unless it involves inventory. And so after his attitude and his temper tantrum, I decide I'm going to maliciously comply. So I do nothing but inventory from that point forward, knowing full and well that we would essentially be coasting until we hit a problem that I would then refuse to fix. Sure enough, not even a week later, I get an email from HR that some sort of bug in the ERP system was preventing them from accessing payroll to pay employees this week. I reply an apology that I am no longer able to work on the ERP bugs due to my supervisor. I then refer them to the ERP system help guide for further assistance. Now, I knew the help guide was not going to help her in the slightest, but it was no longer my problem, so I was not going to deal with it in the slightest. Skip a few days later to Friday, and I check my bank account in the morning before getting up for work, and I laugh because there was no money deposited. The problem in question never got fixed. I hurry up and I get ready for work, excited to see the chaos unfold, and what I was expecting was an understatement. When I show up to work, I see the entire warehouse staff of 50 people completely walking out the front door. I stopped one and I asked why they were leaving, and they replied to me by saying, "I didn't get paid today, so I am not coming back until I do." I go into the office and I see the warehouse manager in a panic. He has jobs that need material and nobody to load into the trucks or deliver them. I ask him if he needs help with anything, and he just screams at me to leave his office because he is getting phone calls from all kinds of superintendents of all these different jobs asking why their material has not arrived yet. I pass by HR on the way to my office, and I see a bunch of bosses huddled up with her over her computer, with her having an angry and confused expression on her face, as well as everybody else. They were clearly trying to figure out the problem. I felt bad for her because it really was something out of her control, but I knew she would ultimately be okay because she had been there for so long that they would never fire her. When I get to my office, I see the vice president waiting for me there. He has a very upset look on his face. When we get inside, he demands to know why I did not fix the problem in HR when she emailed me about it. So I replied the statement I was waiting to say. I said to them, I am no longer allowed to work on ERP problems as it is not in my job title. He then had the most shocked look on his face and asked why all of a sudden I had a change of heart. I then show him the email from my warehouse manager, and I could see the dots connecting in his head. He immediately storms out, and I see him heading straight to the warehouse manager's office. They were in there for a few hours, but eventually he comes back to my office. He seems a lot calmer now and asks me politely if I can fix the problem in HR and if I can resume fixing the ERP if needed. At this point, I liked the relief of responsibility and told him I would only do it if he put it officially in my job title along with a raise. His calmness turned to anger again, and he looks at me and says, "I cannot believe you," as he storms out and returns to his office. A few hours later, he sends out a mass email that he has hired the old ERP consultants to fix the problem, and that next week, everyone would be paid for the money they are owed, along with the money they earned if they return to work. Now, this one surprised me, as he would rather pay over $60,000 a year to consultants than give me a few extra bucks an hour for better work. I think he expected me to change my mind and just do it for my own paycheck, but I decided to wait because I knew how these consultants were, and if they even managed to fix this problem in a week, it would be an absolute miracle. Most of the warehouse staff agreed to return, but were still upset about not getting paid. Sure enough, next Friday comes around and nobody gets paid again. At this point, it is becoming a real problem, and the entire staff is becoming agitated. They have bills to pay. I even heard a bunch of the warehouse talking about some competitors nearby that they could get work for. And at this point, I even considered just fixing the problem because the warehouse didn't deserve to be treated like that due to the poor management of everybody else around them. Maybe I am the jerk here for this, but I am severely underpaid and can barely afford my apartment. There is no reason I should do extra work for free. That same day, the vice president returns to my office and hands me papers. These papers said that I would be promoted to a newly created position that dealt with the inventory as well as ERP upkeep. It would be its own department, and he would be my direct supervisor, and it also came with a hefty raise. And all I had to do was sign the paper and agree. I looked up at him after reading the paper, and he had the saddest look on his face. "Please, just sign it. The consultant said that it would take them weeks to get around to fixing it due to the high volume of clients, and we cannot keep skipping paychecks." So I happily signed it and immediately got to work on the HR issue. And guess what? I managed to fix it in the same day, because at the end of the day, it was just an update issue. And if my original supervisor had just let me help out, then we all could have avoided this mess in the first place. What a crazy story. You literally had them by the throat, and they were not going to be able to get anything done unless you fixed it. Like, you literally almost took down an entire business. That is so awesome in my opinion. And I honestly don't have any sympathy for management, like in the slightest. They would rather bring in these stupid consultants who absolutely would have taken like 2 months just to fix it, rather than pay the guy extra who can do it within a day. I mean, talk about doing things the hard way. And it's really disgusting that they really wanted to try and cut corners this way and have it so this guy would not only do his inventory job, but also fix this system pretty much for free. Like, that is messed up, and that's not fair in the slightest. So hopefully the next time this company tries to cut corners, they don't try to cut around the one person who could probably save their skin. My entitled boss demands that I work during my planned vacation, so I decide to maliciously comply, and I end up getting him fired as a result. Here's what happened. So I've been working at this company for about 3 years. I had been consistently growing in my role and was eventually given a project to own, with 1 to 2 other team members if needed. But it was a major project with a quick turnaround. I determined I could do it myself, though it would be tight, and since I was hoping for a promotion, I took on the project solo. I was able to deliver the project slightly ahead of schedule and with better quality than expected, which allowed us to make a huge sale. The head of the company gave me an award at an all-hands-on-deck meeting for the work I did, and my boss let me know I was on track for an end-of-the-year promotion with a nice pay raise and more responsibilities. But I was needed in another part of the business, so I was going to have to transfer under a new manager that was notoriously hard to work with. I transferred to this manager, and the first meeting we had to get on the same page, I brought up that I had a 3-week planned vacation in 4 months. I had never taken vacation, so I had 6 weeks saved up and did not want to start losing it. He told me of course that would be fine, and we would be able to make it work. About a week later, we have our first meeting with our product team. They had a new large project idea and wanted it to be released in just 3 months. As my team looked over the details, we knew this was a 6 to 8 month project at best, and it would be better to deliver in small increments so they still had something to show in 3 months, or we would need to push out the schedule. My boss was adamantly against both, so throughout the next week, he made us have last-minute 3 to 4 hour brainstorming sessions every day, but he would not tell us until about 3 o'clock in the evening, forcing us all to work late every day that week. At the end of the week, there was was no way we could figure out to deliver everything on the shorter timeline, and so my boss asked me to stay behind after the meeting for another hour. He railed against me, saying I was failing at this project and that he could not see me getting a good annual review in 4 months, and that a promotion wasn't even on the table. This annual review would also include the project I had just received an award for and is supposed to encompass 12 months of work. But he was basing this off of the first 2 weeks on this new team, which really was not fair. At this point, I knew he was ready to use me as a scapegoat for his bad management, and I started applying elsewhere. We continued working on the project, and sure enough, at the end of 3 months, we were still far from being able to deliver, and my boss was getting heat from above. Right around this time, I received an offer from another company that would be the promotion that I wanted and an even larger pay increase. I accepted the offer and negotiated my start date to be right after my vacation, which is now 3 weeks away. That same day, my boss calls me into his office and tells me that we need to talk about this vacation. I reminded him that we had already talked about it months before and that everything is booked, flights, hotels, everything. But he would not let up and told me there's no way I could take 3 weeks off with how behind schedule we already were. He told me I could go on my trip, but I could not take vacation and would be expected to be online during our business hours throughout the trip, which would be about 4 o'clock in the morning until 1 o'clock in the evening, local time at my vacation spot. So I decided to maliciously comply. Every morning while on vacation, I would log on at 4 o'clock in the morning, check my emails, answer questions on our internet chat, and do the minimum work expected, logging off as soon as it hit 1 o'clock p.m., all without burning any vacation time. With 1 week left in vacation, I requested a conference call with my boss to give him my 2 weeks notice. He was shocked and tried everything to get me to stay and finish out the project, including bringing back up the possibility of a promotion. I told him I had already accepted a job with a start date upcoming, and I worked my last 2 weeks before moving on to my new job. Now this is where it gets fun. Because my boss required me not to take vacation, the company had to pay out all of my accrued vacation once I left, a little less than 7 weeks at this point, including the 3 weeks I had originally planned to take. Now short-staffed, I heard from other coworkers that the project missed 2 more adjusted deadlines, and eventually the manager was demoted before being let go from the company. About 6 months later, the head of the first company asked me to lunch to offer me a role of taking over my former boss's old position. I negotiated an even higher pay increase as well as company equity and ended up going back there for 3 more years. So at the end of the day, I couldn't be happier that I came out on top. That manager that you had to deal with was absolutely obnoxious and in my opinion completely out of line. Like, what a betrayal of trust. They say to you when you first come in, oh, that's okay, you can have your vacation in a few months, that's no big deal, only to then, right when the vacation's coming back up, to basically stab you in the back. Like, that is literally what happened. They decided at the last second that no, you can't go on your vacation, and if you do, you gotta work and get stuff done. And at 4 in the morning at that. I don't know if anyone's tried to work at 4 in the morning, especially if you don't do any kind of night shift stuff, but let me tell you, it is miserable. Like, if I was in your shoes, that would be the last time I would want to do any work. That boss is so disrespectful to do that, and it's so good to see that they got let go, because they were not a good manager in the slightest. They were trying to use you as a scapegoat and basically have you as a cop-out for when things go south, and you literally just won an award in the company. I mean, it's so unfair to go from such a high point of your career to then basically being on the chopping block of almost getting fired. That's not fair in the slightest, and honestly, you did not deserve that treatment. But as karma would have it, it's so cool that you came back, not only with a higher pay, but also with company equity. And I'm honestly happy to see that things worked out for you in the end, while also delivering karma to your awful boss who treated you so poorly. My ex-stepmother demands to show up to my exclusive party, despite the fact that I did not invite her on purpose after the awful things she did to me and my family all throughout my childhood. And I honestly don't know what to do. Here's what happened. So I moved far, far away from my birth country and have moved away for almost 13 years now. Part of my reason for leaving was to add physical distance between myself and my ex-stepmother. Now, she is a beautiful woman, but that is her only attribute. She raised me in her own faulty way. By age 12, I was responsible for the entirety of the housework. Not just chores, but all of it. Bathrooms once a week, kitchen twice a day, laundry, cleaning skirting boards, polishing the wood tables, and taking care of glassware. If it wasn't completely to her satisfaction, I had to do it again, and wasn't allowed out to play for the rest of the week. Every day was a list of jobs in the kitchen that would take several several hours after school. She, meanwhile, did not work. I would get up, make myself breakfast, then bring her breakfast in her room, and give her a foot massage while she ate it. Now, I'm not here to write the litany of reasons why this is awful. However, for clear understanding for the readers of the toxic level of parenting I had to put up with on a daily basis. She even spent quality time with my 18-year-old boyfriend, if you know what I mean. So basically, long story short, she's incredibly toxic, and I have worked hard on my mental health and my boundaries, as has my older sister. She had the misfortune of being in the same country and thus being more exposed to this situation. Also, my ex-stepmother was, until he was an adult, our only access to our younger brother. Fast forward to after the coronavirus and all that jazz, my siblings and I organized to catch up in our home country. We are all spread apart location-wise and have 2 children, excluding the younger brother. He's in his early 20s, and we are all in our late 30s and early 40s. So we thought we would organize a big, huge party just for us. We all know each other's friends, and then there's all those other important people that played formative roles in our lives. And by doing this party, it would save us a bunch of time in catching up with old friends instead of going to everybody's places 2 hours at a time. This way, everybody could be here all at once. And then it's only the ones that can't come that we can then make the sacrifice to go and see them. Now, currently, the confirmed attendees of the venue is at 74 people, but there will be kids and partners, etc. So it's probably going to be realistically over 100 people. Word of this party reached my ex-stepmother. After not having heard from her, without exaggeration, in 5 years when she complained that she wasn't invited to my wedding, she messaged me on Facebook to say that she needs to talk. So I think to myself, oh no, this must be about my brother. So I Facebook call her to try and sort this out. She tells me that she's heard that I'm in the country soon, and she wants to come to my party. And since we were on a video call, she prefaced this by laughing when she answered and saying to me, "It's so funny, isn't it, that I look younger than you?" Ladies and gentlemen, it was midnight. I have a toddler and a 6-year-old, and I work 40 hours a week. I also have a husband that thinks I'm beautiful, regardless of anything, even though he always has a super cheesy smile when we get dressed nicely for our dates. And honestly, I was expecting bad news about my brother from the way she messaged me on Facebook. It honestly seemed like something serious happened. But no, she just wants to come to my party. So I said on the call, "Listen, I love you, but I don't want to see you." To which she said she needed to go. And that's fine. I felt happy with my response, and I told my sister, who I know had gone no contact with her when she was pregnant with her second child. 2 days later, she starts the same type of messaging to my sister. She tells me she can't emotionally do it. She had a newborn child, and she does not want to deal with the passive-aggressive conversations. My sister is an absolute legend. She has advocated for me my entire life. I don't need it these days, but if I could do for her what she did for me when I was younger, I was going to pull up my bootstraps and absolutely do it. And that's exactly what I did. I wrote a very calm, clear message explaining that she needed to remove her relationship with her ex-husband's children from her relationship with their child. I said that our brother is someone we want to have a relationship with, as he is our brother. I said she does not get the same treatment, as she has to acknowledge the issues and the damage that she caused as the adult in our formative years, and then very bluntly said that I will protect my family by not allowing contact with her, and that if she does not respect that boundary and attends the party, I will not hesitate to loudly explain to the attendees a very large list of reasons that she is not welcome, starting with her trying to tell people that all of my dad's kids are not his, and her son is the only legitimate heir. So with all things considered, I really hope she doesn't come to this party, because nobody wants to see her or ever have to deal with her. Your ex-stepmother sounds awful. I mean, she seriously messed around with your former boyfriend when you were younger and was just all around an awful human being pretty much the entirety of your childhood. And that's not fair in the slightest. So with all things considered, I don't blame you in the slightest for saying, you know what, I don't want you in my life. You are not beholden to this person in the slightest. They were not a good parental figure in your life, and they actively treated you like garbage. So good for you for setting boundaries and putting your foot down, because from the sounds of it, this ex-stepmother definitely does not seem like a good person. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, linked down below in the description. My entitled coworker is a know-it-all and is constantly bossing me and my coworkers around just to try and get us to do things that are clearly against the rules. And I'm honestly fed up and I don't know what to do. So I had a coworker named Mike, who most of the time was a nice guy, but had a tendency to get a really bad know-it-all attitude that would would drive everybody up a wall. He seems to think because he worked on ships and steel foundries for a total of 40 years, his judgment is the best and only judgment that we should follow. He seems to think that he is qualified for everything. So with that in mind, where I worked, which was a lumber yard, I held one of the highest driver's license. So I drove the large trucks that had air brakes. One day I had to do an inspection on the brakes to make sure they were still compliant with the laws where I live. It's a simple task where you measure a push rod when the brakes are applied. When Mike saw what I was doing, he told me I should stop because I'm not qualified to work on those types of brakes. I told him that I was aware of that and that I am not doing any maintenance on the brakes. I'm just inspecting them to make sure they are compliant with the law. And if they aren't, I'm going to send the truck to be fixed by someone who is qualified. He then says to me,
"But that doesn't make any sense. You never received any kind of training on that. You are not qualified."
So I replied to him by saying that I took the course and I was trained in this matter specifically. This is what the instructors who are government officials said I have to do. But of course, he just kept arguing, saying how it doesn't make any sense and that I shouldn't be doing anything with the brakes. But I just kept working, ignoring what he said. And keep in mind, he doesn't have my type of license. He never took the course himself, so he literally doesn't know what he's talking about. Another instance involved my boss, who owned a few locations. So on occasion, I'd have to take my truck to the other location to get some stock for our location. There was another guy who I worked with who was able to do deliveries, but for some reason, Mike leaves it all for me to do. And this day, I was making several trips to my boss's other location, all so I could get the stock. I was on my way back at around 12:30, and I still had to go back to the other location later to get more stock, so I was planning on having my lunch break as soon as I was back. Meanwhile, people in the store where I worked told Mike to make sure I had my lunch break as soon as I was back as well. So everyone really was in the know. So I arrive, I unstrap my load, and Mike comes up with a forklift. He says to me,
"I have a delivery loaded on the other truck. While I unload this, you can go do the delivery."
I told him I haven't eaten yet, so I'm gonna go have lunch first. In a rather snarky tone, he goes to me and says,
"What? You mean to tell me that you didn't eat while on the run?"
I said to him, "No, because my lunch today requires a microwave." He replies to me by saying that it's my fault and that I should be bringing a lunch that is better prepared. So I just took my lunch, especially since I was entitled to it, and if he was going to argue, I would have pointed out whether I had my lunch on the road or here, I was still allowed to take 30 minutes. So the other driver did the delivery while I ate. Another thing Mike likes to do is to follow the labor laws, which is good, but he seems to only want to follow them as long as it doesn't make his job harder, while also ensuring that he wouldn't be the one getting in trouble if they are violated. We had a worker around 19 or 20 years old. He had his driver's license, and Mike wanted him to do the deliveries. So a store worker named Stacy consulted the bosses to see if they'd allow it. They informed Stacy that their insurance company won't cover someone under 24 to drive any company vehicles. Stacy told this to Mike, and Mike apparently was arguing with Stacy for a little bit, saying how the worker is capable and he has a driver's license, so he should be doing the deliveries. But Stacy argued back that she's just relaying what the boss told her, stating that it's not covered under insurance, so therefore he can't drive any of the vehicles because it's illegal. I think a few times Mike tried having the worker go on deliveries, but the worker refused, saying if he's not insured, he's not driving. Another instance of Mike's entitlement involved a shed that we had at the place that we primarily work in. The one side is lined with bins filled with lumber, and this is a place where we grab from if a customer needs a couple of pieces, with the larger quantities still sitting outside. Mike wanted the bins that were close to empty filled, but told us not to fill them until we empty the bins of the lumber before bringing in the new lumber. So naturally, when we had a customer, we would grab out of those bins, just trying to deplete it like Mike required. But every time, Mike would stop us and say,
"No, don't grab any lumber from in here. Give them the lumber all outside."
So after several days of attempting to empty the bins, with Mike constantly telling us to grab from outside, we just gave up trying and just grabbed lumber from outside only. And wouldn't you know it, after about a week, Mike noticed the bins still near empty, with the old lumber still in there. He got mad, saying how it shouldn't take over a week to empty the bins and put newer stuff in stock. My driver at the time, named Al, had had enough. He said to Mike, "Alright then, Mike, how do you want us to do this then? You don't want these bins filled until all the old stock is gone, yet you don't want us grabbing anything from in here and keep telling us to grab from outside only. You can't have it both ways." Mike then replies, "Oh, I didn't think of that." So honestly, with all things considered, board. My coworker is absolutely obnoxious, and I really don't enjoy working with them. Yeah, Mike sounds really stupid in this story. I'm just gonna say it. It seems like they really don't know what they want, and they're one of those busybodies that because they have so much experience, they're under the assumption that they just know better than everybody else. And that's simply obviously not the case. So hopefully when working with Mike, you find some kind of way of getting him away from you, because someone that annoying can really be frustrating. And hopefully for the sake of your job, you don't have to deal with him super often. My boyfriend's entitled mom is telling her friends that I do haircuts for free, despite the fact that I only do free haircuts outside of work and on occasion to selective family members. And I'm so frustrated by her entitlement, and I seriously don't know what to do. So for the sake of the story, I'll be calling my boyfriend Nathan. That's not his real name, it's a fake one. So I've been dating my boyfriend for a year and a half. Things have been really good, and he is my best friend. I also get along really well with his family, as he does with mine. I go to cosmetology school currently, and I hope to become a hairstylist in the future. I've done my family's hair, as well as my boyfriend's family, for free when I am free. For example, I did my boyfriend's little sister's hair for her junior prom, and have done his mom's twice for weddings. I don't charge them because I'm not on the clock, and because I don't want to accept their money when I offered to help them in the first place. On Saturday, I had a woman come into my school and my salon and ask for me to do her hair. For some info, students at my school are allowed to do people's hair, and people can come into the salon to get their hair done by these students. The prices are a lot lower. Think instead of a $50 treatment, it would only be about $14. But obviously, we're newer students, so you're not going to be with someone who's super experienced. We do get a lot of customers. Most of my friends come in, and sometimes even my boyfriend. So anyways, the lady comes in and asks for me specifically. I wasn't working on anyone, so I gladly helped her out. We ended up doing a full scalp treatment, plus a cut and a blowout plus styling. For salons in my area, this would have easily been anywhere between $60 to $80. But at the place I work at, this was more like only $20. When she was all finished, I brought her to the front and gave her the total. She looked at me and said, "Aren't you Nathan's girlfriend?" And I didn't know who this woman was, but I said, "Oh, yes, I am." She then mentioned that Nathan's mom had said that I worked here and that I don't charge for family members. This lady then looks at me and says, "I didn't bring any money." Again, I have no idea who this woman is, and I have never said anything close to that. I told her that I'm currently a student and I do work here, but our school and company does charge. She was like, "No, I just spoke with her, and she says you do family and friends hair for free." So I responded by saying that while I have done some family's hair, as well as my boyfriend's family's hair for free, I have done it at theirs or my house, where I would then be off the clock. No matter what I told her, she would not listen, and my teacher and salon owner had to come forward and help the lady. She basically told my manager that I said I have a family discount, and now I'm making her pay even though I told her she didn't have to. Thankfully, my manager heard our entire conversation before she came over and basically told her that's not true. The woman did have money and threw a $20 bill on the counter before she walked out. I apologized to my teacher, but she told me not to worry. About an hour later, my boyfriend's mom showed up. I was working the counter at this time, so I was free to talk to her. I was about to tell her about the woman from earlier, but she kind of started talking right away. She said, "My friend just told me what happened and I'm not sure what to tell her." I told her I wasn't sure what she meant, and I told her what happened. Apparently though, she knew what happened, and everything that lady told me was true. To summarize, my boyfriend's mom was talking to her friend, which was the lady from earlier, about where to get their hair done. She told her friend about me and how I do hair at a salon for a cheap price. She then told her friend to tell me that she knows my boyfriend's family and that I wouldn't charge her. I said to her that I have no control over prices and that I have never done work for free. She told me that I do her and her daughter's hair all the time for free, and that she assumed I'd be nice enough to lend a hand to other people that they were close with. I told her I don't know why she would assume that, as this is my job and I'm still in school. I also told her that the times I've done her and her daughter's hair, I've done it at their houses when I wasn't currently at school. She ended the conversation by saying that I'm just a student and she doesn't understand why I would still need to get paid when I still have a lot to work on. She said to me, "Nathan says a lot of sweet things about you, and I was really looking forward to other people meeting you. I now have to go around telling my friends that you are actually sweet and we do actually like you, but it's fine, I guess. I'll see you soon." And then she just straight up left. The entire time she was very passive aggressive and very fake nice and fake understanding. I'm honestly at a loss for words right now. Throughout my entire time dating Nathan, I have never once gotten the impression that she didn't like me, and she's never acted like this to me before ever. I'm supposed to have dinner with him and his family on Wednesday, but I'm not really sure I want to anymore. I don't really want to see her, and I feel really awkward and uncomfortable. Nathan has been at a tournament all weekend, so I haven't gotten the chance to tell him what happened. I don't know how to tell him or how he's going to react. What should I do? Your boyfriend's mom is absolutely unbelievably entitled. Like, she literally sent her friend over to your place of business just to try and get a free haircut. Like, that is not okay. So I really think having some kind of conversation moving forward would probably be really good for you as well as your boyfriend, because she is way out of line. There's no good excuse for this type of action, and there's no good excuse for her to be like, oh yeah, it's fine, she'll do your hair for free. Like, what, is this a charity suddenly or something? I think with the help of your boyfriend, and depending on how he reacts to the situation, I think it's time to set some very clear boundaries, because this lady tried to cheat you out of work, and that's not fair for you in the slightest. So hopefully this conversation goes well, because your boyfriend's mom sounds like an absolute Karen, and hopefully by setting up expectations now, she can understand exactly where you stand, and she can know to never do that ever again. An entitled man gets evicted from our hotel after screaming and crying about his reservation, and I'm honestly blown away by his entitlement. Here's what happened. So we will call this guy Steven, that's not his real name. I personally handled Steven's check-in. Nothing out of the ordinary, but I thought he was a bit forceful and intimidating when he spoke to me. As I was checking him in, he asked about a late checkout at around 1 o'clock p.m. I told him that we could accommodate that, but per our policy, we'd have to pay for half a day. Now, he had booked a prepaid non-refundable reservation through a third party, and as such, I'd have to make a new reservation just to change for his late checkout. And honestly, third parties suck. I explained why a new reservation would be necessary if he wanted a 1 p.m. checkout, and thankfully he was super understanding and polite about it, and thanked me for my help. I noted the 1 p.m. checkout in 3 different places. I wrote it in the recap email, which goes to both my manager and the front desk agent coming in, so we can all stay up to date on what's going on, as well as in the notes within his reservation, while also putting it in housekeeping's notes so they would know that he'd be there until 1 o'clock. He then asked me for a corkscrew that night. It's not a strange request, and I actually bought a corkscrew for the hotel because they only had a bottle opener, so I gave it to him to use, and he never returned it. Well, fast forward to the next afternoon, and he storms into the lobby after getting a courtesy call from the front desk at around 1:30 p.m. regarding his late checkout and how payment would be for a full night if he didn't check out by 2 o'clock p.m. Steven was reeking of alcohol and starts yelling at the front desk. He said that I told him that he could stay until 8 o'clock p.m. for half day's price. My coworker immediately said, no, I'm certain she didn't say that. He tried insisting, before then saying that the guy who did the night audit also told him that he could stay until 8 o'clock p.m. And then he said that the manager told him it was okay over the phone. My coworker, though, held steady and did not humor any of his lies. And when someone won't believe your lies, what's left for a grown man to do but to start screeching and start making veiled threats? And that's exactly what Steven did. He insulted my coworker, sat down at the high top table in the lobby, and just stared at her maliciously, and then got back up to scream some more. He demanded to see the manager, so my coworker called her, and she said that she'd be at the hotel as soon as possible. Meanwhile, Steven is foaming at the mouth and calling the front desk an absolute jerk, and saying that she would get exactly what's coming to her. He was screaming, throwing insults, and saying all this stuff. She did ask him to leave, but he refused, and then she told him to leave once again, and he still refused. He then said, if you try to throw me out of here, I'm gonna call the cops. My coworker then said, you know what? That's a good idea. Let's call the cops. And so that's exactly what she did. My manager then arrived and told this guy he needed to get his stuff and get out. And of course, he refused and wanted a full refund. But you know what? He's not getting that. The police finally get there, and he slipped out the side door to try and get in his car. The police stopped him and told him he couldn't drive while he was drunk. They told him that someone would need to drive for him, and Steven would just have to come back and get his car when he was sober. They told him that he would be arrested if he came back inside and started any more garbage. So Steven left, and I really wish that this had been the end of it. But apparently, while he was pouting, while we were waiting for the police to get there, he made another prepaid non-refundable reservation through a third-party site, most likely as an attempt to prevent us from throwing him out. Well, later that night, I got a call from a third-party customer service rep saying that she had a client on the phone who says he was forced to leave the hotel for no reason reason and was denied any kind of refund. She asked if I could explain, and I did. I told her that he'd been removed by the police after drunkenly threatening the staff. And this lady really asked me why he felt the need to threaten us, as if there's any valid reason to threaten the front desk. So I told her, and she says, well, can you at least cancel and refund his reservation for tonight? I said to her, no, I'm not authorized to cancel any prepaid non-refundable reservations. What part of non-refundable did she not understand? So she said to me, so you're refusing to give my client a refund? So I respond by saying, no ma'am, I'm saying that I can't cancel a third-party reservation. She then completely ignores me and goes on to say, I'll tell my client then that you're refusing a refund. Can I have your name for the record? Imagine the sheer audacity it takes to not only make veiled threats about being evicted by the police, but to then go crying to your third party asking for a refund because he was apparently unfairly denied a room. No, Steven, you can't stay until 8 o'clock without paying for it. Seems like a logical conclusion to make, but with people like Steven, logic doesn't seem to enter the equation. Yeah, Steven sounds like a big crybaby. Like he literally lied to everybody about everything. Not only the people at the front desk, but also the third-party agent who's clearly stuck in the middle while also having some axe to grind for themselves. I mean, what is wrong with people? So hopefully the next time Steven goes to some kind of hotel, he doesn't act like a complete fool, because otherwise he'll probably just get evicted again. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. To finish listening to all the stories, check out the playlist at the top of the description. And if you want some chill music to put on in the background, check out easymode.com. If you like Am I the Jerk, subscribe to Am I the Genius. Everything will be linked down below in the description.